Chapter 1013, Greater Danger Lies Behind. Zhou Gaoyang slashed his sword, and sneered, "So what if you know? You're still going to die anyway." Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Brother, you definitely shouldn't have dragged innocent people into this matter." "Oh, so you want to stand up for them?" Terrifying divine light flashed from Zhou Gaoyang's sword as he relentlessly slashed at Ling Han. His strikes were especially simple, and all of them targeted Ling Han's vital points. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "I certainly don't have that much spare time. However, there's someone who's been itching to pulverize you for a long time." Zhou Gaoyang continued to attack as he asked, "Oh? Who is it?" "Me." Yang Taicheng walked over following a cold humph. An overwhelming aura radiated from his 3-meter-tall body, and his face was livid and full of killing intent. Goosebumps instantly formed on Zhou Gaoyang's skin as he felt a cold chill run down his spine and through his 4 limbs. He was an entire minor level weaker than Yang Taicheng, and he was only an experienced assassin, not a prodigy who could fight above his cultivation level. On the other hand, Yang Taicheng was a 2-star genius. In other words, there was a whopping difference of 6 sub-minor levels between them. There was no doubt that this would be a one-sided battle. Zhou Gaoyang wasn't Ling Han, and he didn't have a sturdy physique either. Against an elite like Yang Taicheng, it was extremely likely that he would be killed in 10 strikes. Yang Taicheng, die. The 3 powerful pirates also charged over. Yang Taicheng simply blocked them with one hand as he continued to stare at Zhou Gaoyang coldly. "Do you still have anything to say?" Zhou Gaoyang remained silent. Then, he suddenly became one with his sword. Xiao. His body instantly soared through the air. He wasn't attacking Yang Taicheng, nor was he trying to drag Ling Han down with him. Rather, he was attempting to leap into the sea. His aim was evidently to escape to the seabed. Although the gravity field here was terrifying, one would almost certainly sink if they entered the sea, and they would have to walk like normal people on the seabed. After a good 8 or 10 years, one would definitely be able to walk back out of the sea. This was a better option than struggling against Yang Taicheng and facing certain death, no? Trying to escape? Yang Taicheng sneered as his other hand reached out and grabbed at Zhou Gaoyang. This strike exemplified the crushing power of a cultivator at the peak stage of the consummate level. As if it were a small mountain, his large black hand grew incredibly large. A dozen or so divine patterns that exuded a frightening aura pulsed on his hand. Boom! This hand was far too large, and it instantly cast a shadow over the entire ship, blocking Zhou Gaoyang's path of escape. "Sky-soaring sword!" Zhou Gaoyang exclaimed softly. His speed suddenly increased dramatically as he became one with his sword and hurtled toward the large hand. Pooh! As if it were raining drops of light, sword light exploded through the air. Ling Han activated his Eye of Truth, only to see that Zhou Gaoyang had managed to create a hole in the large hand. Xiao! Zhou Gaoyang dashed out, yet the sword light around him had already become extremely dim. It was evident that he had paid a heavy price to use this technique. Yang Taicheng waved his large hand as he charged out in pursuit, and sneered, "Do you think you can escape?" "Ah!" Zhou Gaoyang screamed in agony as the large hand wrapped around him and crushed his bones. The difference in strength was extremely evident. There was a gulf of 6 sub-minor levels, and Zhou Gaoyang more so lacked the will to battle. His only thought was to escape, yet in the end, this made it even easier for Yang Taicheng to capture him. Die! The 3 pirates attacked Yang Taicheng relentlessly. Pung, pung, pung. Their attacks continued to rain down on him. Yang Taicheng was only fighting them with one hand, so he was naturally unable to completely mitigate their attacks. As a result, he was struck by a few of them. However, his physique was also astonishingly strong, so he merely had some blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. He was battling against 3 elites at the same time, yet he was still able to capture another elite who was at the peak stage of the high extreme. His strength was truly astounding. "Spare me." Zhou Gaoyang immediately begged. "I swear I didn't kill them. It really wasn't me." "Pooh." How would Yang Taicheng believe him? He clenched his right hand, and Zhou Gaoyang instantly exploded into a cloud of blood. The large hand slowly dissipated as he humphed and unclenched his fist. "Pirates, let me send you all to hell today." His killing intent had been inflamed, and an overwhelming might exuded from his tall demon-like body. Kill! 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 The pirates weren't afraid of battle either. "Kaka, brat, it's only you and me again. Die!" The Baldy started to attack Ling Han again. Ling Han replied with strikes of his own. As long as his opponent didn't unleash his most powerful move, Ling Han's sturdy physique would definitely be able to withstand all of his attacks. He would at most suffer some minor wounds, but these could be instantly healed by his indestructible Heaven Scroll. In terms of battle prowess, he was only at 5 or 6 stars right now. In terms of resistance to attacks, however, he was definitely at a freakish 10 stars. It was truly unbelievable that even an elite at the consummate level wasn't able to kill him. Meanwhile, Ling Han felt that it was a pity that he couldn't help Shui Yanyu kill more pirates. "I'll kill them myself, then." Ling Han continuously activated his 7-kill subduing soul technique, with even cultivators at the peak stage of the medium extreme being affected. After stunning his enemies, Ling Han would kill them with one punch and then store them into his spatial spirit tool. The Baldy roared in fury. He was chasing and attacking Ling Han, yet Ling Han still had the time and leisure to kill his fellow pirates. This was utterly humiliating. On the one hand, the weaker pirates were being wiped out. On the other hand, the sailors on the ship were also being massacred. This caused Yang Taicheng to almost go crazy with rage. His 3-meter-tall body expanded again, transforming into a giant 6 meters tall. His clothes were torn into shreds, and only a pair of underpants covered his sensitive region. 9 pulsating circular symbols were visible on his body, and they raised his power by a significant margin. 9-symbol divine pattern, a few pirates exclaimed. This is the Yang clan's secret technique, and one has to sacrifice a certain amount of their lifespan in order to activate it. It can raise one's battle prowess by 1 star. Yang Taicheng was already extremely strong. Now that his battle prowess had been elevated by 1 more star, there was definitely no one on the ship who could fight him head-on. After all, this was a secret technique that reduced one's lifespan. To living beings, what was more precious than their lifespan? "All of you can die." Yang Taicheng unleashed his fury at the pirates. Ling Han was also astonished by the sight before him. If he were to battle against Yang Taicheng head-on, it was extremely likely that his internal organs would be punctured in under 10 exchanges. After 100 exchanges, even his godly bones faced the risk of being completely shattered. Yang Taicheng was at the consummate level, after all, and his battle prowess had even more so reached 3 stars right now. The pirates were instantly put on their back foot after Yang Taicheng activated his secret technique. Their situation was only worsened by the fact that Lu Ying and the others were all starting to unleash their full battle prowess. However, in Ling Han's eyes, the most eye-catching person wasn't Lu Ying the consummate level cultivator or Yang Taicheng the giant. Instead, it was Fu Tian, the youth who only looked to be 16 or 17 years old. This person was an absolute beast. His cultivation level was only at the peak stage of the low extreme, yet his battle prowess was extremely powerful. He didn't use any weapons, and instead used his various body parts to spectacular effects. In fact, Ling Han had even seen him biting off the nose of his opponent. Chapter 1014, Catastrophe Caused by Demonic Snakes. When cultivators fought, they usually used their hands or feet. Otherwise, they would use some sort of weapon. Only a very, very small minority would choose to practice peculiar techniques such as Iron Head and so on. However, apart from Hunyo in the past, perhaps this youth was the only other person who used his mouth as a weapon. Fu Tian's fighting style was almost a replica of Hunyo's. However, he was even more vicious, with his steel-like hands being able to easily rip through his opponent's defenses. He would tear their intestines out and crush their throat with his mouth. In fact, he would attack in whatever manner as long as it could kill the enemy. He truly took full advantage of all his body parts. This was, of course, a result of him training intensely. He had most likely experienced countless similar battles, and such attacks had perhaps already become a natural instinct to him. Once he started fighting, his body would naturally move according to these ingrained instincts. Where on earth did this youth come from? Retreat! Retreat! The pirates couldn't endure the attacks any longer. 60 of them had boarded this ship, yet only less than 20 of them still remained standing. They had undoubtedly suffered a heavy loss. Most importantly, they were still unable to capture this ship after losing so many companions. None of you shall escape. Yang Taicheng humphed coldly. He unleashed his full battle prowess as he charged from one end of the ship to the other. He was determined not to let a single pirate escape. Pang! At this moment, the ship suddenly shuddered violently, and almost capsized. The people on the ship all stumbled and stopped their battles. What was going on? Not good. The expressions of Yang Taicheng and a few pirates changed drastically as they peered into the distance. Judging by their shocked and terrified expressions, they had definitely come across grave danger. Ling Han activated his Eye of Truth and also peered into the distance. He saw hundreds of giant snakes swimming over, each measuring over 30 meters in length and having a body as thick as a barrel. Green patterns adorned their bodies. Green-patterned demonic snakes, a sailor yelped. It was a type of demonic beast unique to the Star Sea. They were descendants of the demonic snake, and were a type of social demonic beast. Each nest would have at least several hundred mature snakes at the mountain river tier. When coming across such demonic beasts, the only option for small-sized ships was to escape. Pang! The ship shuddered again, and it suddenly tilted to the left. It was already on the verge of capsizing. Humph! Yang Taicheng leaped toward the right of the ship and heavily stomped down. The ship shuddered violently, and the momentum of the tilt was instantly halted. Then, the ship started to tilt the other way. At the same time, there was a gigantic snake ramming the ship from underneath, trying to capsize it. If the cultivators fell into the water, their battle prowess would definitely take a huge hit. After reaching the immortal level, these demonic beasts were as intelligent as humans, and could even shape-shift into human form. Thus, they naturally knew how to maximize their advantages. Ling Han looked around, only to find that they had already been encircled by the gigantic snakes. These snakes measured over 30 meters in length, and all of them were at the mountain river tier, though it was unclear what their specific cultivation level was. There were also some small snakes that measured only 3 meters in length, though these snakes lagged a long distance behind their gigantic brethren. Moreover, they were only at the shattering void or heaven tier. It was clear that they didn't have the right to participate in the battle. They could only come over to feast on the flesh of the cultivators after the gigantic snakes finished the fight. Spiritual meat was nutritious to cultivators, and on the flip side, the blood essence of cultivators was also nutritious to demonic beasts. This was especially the case with immortal-level cultivators, whose blood essence was extremely nutritious to demonic beasts at the Shattering Void tier. This nest of snakes had probably been attracted by the stench of blood in the sea. They were here to enjoy a hearty meal. The situation was extremely precarious. Pang! The ship continued to rock back and forth as the snake underneath the ship relentlessly tried to capsize them. Right now, none of them dared to fight among themselves anymore. They stood at the edges of the ship as they used their powers to maintain its balance. If the ship capsized, few of them would be able to survive. Pung! 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 As if someone were beating gongs, the ship groaned and creaked as it shuddered violently. Damn it! These demonic snakes are trying to break the ship apart. Their expressions all changed drastically. If one were to dive into the sea right now, they would see over 10 snakes spitting pellets of water at the bottom of the ship. These pellets of water would explode upon hitting the bottom of the hull, causing it to rock intensely. Further below these snakes, there was a gigantic demonic snake that measured over 300 meters in length. The patterns on its body had a dim silver luster. This was the demonic snake king, and its cultivation level had already reached the peak stage of the mountain river tier. In fact, it even had a chance to break through to the sun-moon tier. Thus, the patterns on its body were also different from the other snakes. It was this snake that had been ramming the ship and trying to capsize it before. As if it were being lashed by a severe storm, the ship rocked back and forth vigorously. Those who were under the immortal level were all thrown off their feet and into the sea. Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others stood their ground firmly as if their feet were glued to the deck. They remained still no matter how hard the ship rocked or shuddered. However, their expressions were all especially solemn. They all knew that it was only a matter of time before the ship broke apart. We've already been stuck here for a long time. If we can hold on for 2 more days, the next ship will catch up to us. It's a large ship, and there's a great elite at the sun-moon tier guarding it. Yang Taicheng tried to raise everyone's spirits. If there were a great elite at the sun-moon tier, they would be able to slay thousands or even tens of thousands of these snakes, much less a mere several hundred. The problem was, could they hold on for 2 more days? The ship is falling apart. Fu Tian suddenly shouted. However, there was no hint of apprehension on his face, only an unyielding fighting spirit. He was definitely a battle maniac. Crack! Sure enough, a loud snapping sound traveled out from the ship. Its keel had been shattered. They all looked at each other, yet the ship disintegrated with a deafening boom before they could even open their mouths to speak. The ship broke into dozens of pieces. Find a piece to stand on. Yang Taicheng roared. Otherwise, you'll definitely die if you battle while not being able to float. He was the captain of the ship, so he had to take responsibility for the safety of his sailors and passengers. Everyone heeded his advice and found various pieces of the ship to stand on. The pirates also stopped fighting, the 20 or so of them moving to 3 separate pieces of the wreckage. As for the small ships that they had come on, these had already been obliterated by the demonic snakes. Boom! A gigantic snake surfaced from the sea and slammed its thick and powerful tail into a group of people who were standing on flotsam. Unfortunately, Ling Han was on this piece of wreckage. Fortunately, however, Ang Taicheng was also on this piece of wreckage. Fuck off. He clenched his fist and swung it at the snake's tail. Pung! The snake's tail exploded into a cloud of blood, and the excruciating pain made it squirm about and send huge waves surging through the sea. As expected of Yang Taicheng. So strong. Wife, come closer. Ling Han's left arm was wrapped around Shui Yenyu's slender waist as he held his sword in his right hand. Us 2 lovers might die here today, yet you still haven't told me that you love me yet. You're not going to let me die with such regret, are you? Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him. Ling Han was far too good at acting. He clearly had the Black Tower, so even if the others all died, the 2 of them would still be absolutely safe. Chapter 10-15, Demonic Snake King. The demonic snakes started to attack. Pung! 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 Their attacks varied greatly, with some snakes spitting water pellets and other snakes whipping their tails. There were also snakes that rammed the flotsam with their bodies. Anyhow, their goal was all the same, and that was to push Ling Han and the other survivors off the wreckage and into the sea. Once they fell into the sea, the demonic snakes would be able to transform them into food with ease. Now that it had come to this, none of the cultivators dared to hide their abilities anymore. Otherwise, they really would be seeking death. They all unleashed their full battle prowess. Although Ling Han didn't need to worry about his safety, it would still be extremely troublesome if he were to sink to the seabed and have to walk back to shore. Thus, he also unleashed his full strength, using his body like a bow and his origin power as arrows as he attacked the snakes in the distance. He didn't use the arrows that were forged from godly metal, yet he was still able to unleash a battle prowess of 5 stars. One had to realize that Ling Han's cultivation level had already reached the early stage of the medium extreme. After an elevation of 5 stars, his battle prowess was now on par with the middle stage of the medium extreme. As such, the demonic snakes with a cultivation level under the high extreme were all insta-killed by his arrows. This couldn't be helped. The annihilating dragon star arrow was too fast, and those weaker than Ling Han didn't have any chance of dodging it at all. Their only choice was to be insta-killed. Although cultivators were generally afraid of close-quarter combat, they would still only maintain a distance of around 7 or 8 meters when they fought. This distance could maximize their battle prowess. However, this distance was nothing compared to the annihilating dragon star arrow. As a result, no one could compare to Ling Han when it came to the efficiency of slaying enemies. When Yang Taicheng saw this, he decided that he might as well only defend and not attack. He would ensure the safety of the wreckage they were on, while Ling Han would freely unleash his most powerful attacks. Xiao, 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 xiao. The arrows whizzed out one after another, causing huge damage and many deaths among the nest one of snakes. Pang! The seas instantly parted as a gigantic demonic snake slithered out. The patterns on its body were surprisingly silver in color. Demonic Snake King. Yang Tiecheng's expression instantly became grim. Shua! The demonic Snake King opened its jaws as it appeared and spat a large water pellet at Yang Taicheng. This water pellet was no slower than Ling Han's annihilating dragon star arrow, and it arrived before Yang Tiecheng's body almost as soon as the demonic Snake King spat it out. Ha! Yang Taicheng poured all of his power into his fist as he punched at the water pellet. Pang! His fist collided with the water pellet, yet the tremendous force sent him flying hundreds of meters back. Only then did he fall into the sea with a plop. Even the powerful Yang Taicheng is no match for the demonic Snake King. Everyone was stunned by this sight. Were they all going to die here? Pang! A figure surfaced from the sea. This was none other than Yang Taicheng, and his legs became a blur as he sprinted across the water surface. He was pushing himself to the extreme, and cold sweat was pouring down his face. The gravity field enveloping this sea was tremendously powerful, meaning that one would need to expend huge amounts of origin power if they wanted to resist its pull. Thus, Yang Taicheng had paid a huge price even though he had only covered a short distance of a mere several hundred meters. There was nothing he could have done about this, either, as sinking to the bottom would have been as good as dying. Dozens of giant snakes instantly dashed toward Yang Taicheng. However, he was a 3-star genius on top of being at the consummate level right now, so he was able to kill a snake with each punch that he threw. The air around him instantly became misty with blood. The demonic Snake King was enraged, and it immediately slithered back into the sea. When it resurfaced, it was already in front of Yang Tiecheng's body. Its head was held high as it prepared to spit another water pellet. Go! Ling Han fired another arrow. However, not only did he locate the demonic Snake King's weak point with his eye of truth this time, but he even activated his divine patterns of flame to increase the might of the arrow. Even the demonic Snake King didn't dare face this attack head-on. Pa! The demonic Snake King swatted the origin power arrow aside with its tail, yet Yang Taicheng had already seized the opportunity to escape from before it. He leaped through the air and landed on a wooden plank. Although this plank was small, it was enough to let him catch his breath. The wooden plank bobbed up and down in the sea. The demonic Snake King was furious, and it whipped its head around to glare at Ling Han with its lantern-sized eyes. A frosty aura radiated from its body. Apprehension gripped Ling Han's heart. The demonic Snake King was incredibly powerful, and it was probably infinitely close to reaching the Sun-Moon tier. It was because of its overwhelming might that Ling Han felt a cold chill shoot through his body. Its attack was definitely going to be earth-shattering. It was this brat that attracted the attention of the demonic Snake King. Push him into the sea. Otherwise, we'll all be dragged down along with him. Luo Wu and Fan Yong were also on the same piece of wreckage, and right now, both of them were staring daggers at Ling Han. It was evident that the demonic Snake King had its eyes set on Ling Han. Under its powerful attack, the other people on the wreckage would also be affected. However, if they pushed Ling Han off, they would still be able to hold on to their dear life for a little while longer. As long as they lived, there was still hope that they could survive until the next large ship came. At that time, they would be freed from this precarious situation. Why don't you two jump off? Ling Han asked coldly. These two people were truly selfish to the extreme. They were already facing such an ordeal, yet the two of them still persisted in causing internal conflict. In your dreams. We'll send you on your way now. Luo Wu and Fan Yong reached out in unison. They had come here to kill Ling Han anyway, and they had only held back because they had been afraid of the others before. Now that their lives were in danger, what more did they care? Both of them were elites at the high extreme, so the might of their attacks was naturally astonishing. Ling Han humphed as he activated his 7-kill subduing soul technique. His target was Fan Yong, yet a barrier of light unexpectedly materialized on his body, forcefully blocking his spiritual attack. Fan Yong roared with laughter, and sneered, "Ha ha ha ha. Young master bestowed me with this rare treasure that can defend against divine sense attacks. Moreover, it's a treasure that's been refined by a great elite at the heavenly body tier. You didn't expect this, did you? It was a pity that the divine sword was with Sua Shao right now, or he would have been able to cut Ling Han into two. This didn't matter, though, as he and Luo Wu would definitely be able to blast Ling Han into the sea. Pang! The two of them attacked in unison, and, sure enough, Ling Han was directly pushed off the wreckage of the ship. He fell into the sea with a plop. Ling Han! Shui Yenyu yelped in astonishment, and jumped into the sea after him. Stupid woman! Fan Yong couldn't help but curse upon seeing this. However, his expression was relatively dark. He knew how obsessed Zhao Luan was with this woman. Zhao Luan was determined to make her his wife once he advanced to the Sun-Moon tier. However, there was a 99% chance that Shui Yenyu would die in this sea now, so how were he and Zhao Shao supposed to explain this to Zhao Luan? He didn't have the spare time to mull over this thorny problem now, as the demonic snakes had already started to launch a new wave of ferocious attacks. Kill, 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 kill. Although there were few beings on both sides, they were all immortals at the mountain river tier, and they were all equivalent to bodies that gathered the essence of heaven and earth. The blood that they shed possessed overwhelming vitality and power, and the nearby seawater was all dyed a bloody red. This attracted countless weaker fish, but also attracted beings that were more powerful than them at the same time. A large flat fish appeared. Its two eyes were surprisingly located on only one side of its head. Its speed was incredibly quick, and it spread its jaws open as it surfaced from below the sea. At least a dozen giant snakes instantly disappeared into its mouth. It was a terrifying demonic beast at the Sun-Moon tier. Chapter 1016, Extreme Shamelessness. A demonic beast at the Sun-Moon tier had appeared. Not only were the cultivators fleeing as quickly as they could, but even the nest of demonic snakes was also fleeing in all directions. The demonic snake king that had been extremely mighty and ferocious just then was like a mere eel before the gigantic fish. It became the gigantic fish's main target, and it was captured and disposed of in no time at all. It was crushed in the gigantic fish's maw, and then it was swallowed into its belly. The demonic snake king had been one step away from advancing into the sun-moon tier, yet it was this tiny distance that set it apart from a being that was genuinely at the sun-moon tier. It was unable to put up any true resistance before being eaten. The gigantic fish didn't seem satisfied, and it immediately swam toward the remaining survivors. It wasn't picky at all, and it ate demonic snakes and cultivators alike. After wreaking havoc and satisfying its craving, it swished its tail and disappeared into the depths of the sea. The situation truly changed a myriad of times in the blink of an eye. The demonic snakes had been enjoying a great advantage before. Under the demonic snake king's lead, it seemed as though they would be able to wipe out all of the cultivators. However, in the blink of an eye, a large majority of these demonic snakes had already disappeared into the gigantic fish's belly. Only less than 10 remained, and they posed absolutely no threat to anyone anymore. Still, the human cultivators didn't seem to have it any better either. The pirates had all been killed, Luo Yu and Zhou Xiao had been killed, and only Lu Ying remained out of Sha Yuan's 4 loyal guards. The Yang clan had also suffered severe losses, with Yang Taiching being the only surviving member of the ship's crew. In addition to him, Jin Zhihui, Fu Tian, and Yin Yuanxiang had also managed to survive. All in all, there were only 7 survivors left. They were all sitting on a piece of the ship's wreckage, and had already drifted extremely far away from where they had been battling just then. All of them wore solemn expressions. Huh! A look of surprise instantly appeared on Yang Tiecheng's face as he looked behind him. This was because there was a piece of wreckage drifting toward them from the distance. Moreover, there were 2 people standing on top of it, Ling Han and Shui Yenyu. The others were also greatly astonished as they followed Yang Tiecheng's gaze. Is this Ling Han an undying freak? Not only did he survive everyone's attacks on the ship, he even managed to pull through it unscathed. Afterward, he was targeted by a pirate elite, yet he still managed to live on just fine. Finally, he was blasted into the sea, where, logically speaking, he should have been attacked and ripped to shreds by the snakes. Yet, both he and Shui Yenyu appeared before them unscathed. How were they meant to accept this? Ling Han waved, and said, "Hey, long time no see." He and Shui Yenyu paddled toward Yang Taicheng and the others. The others were all wounded to some extent, and it almost drove them crazy to see how relaxed Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were. Why do they seem like they're on a holiday? Contrary to the others, Yang Taicheng was fairly delighted to see that they were safe. You managed to make it out unscathed? That's great. Ling Han had killed a large number of demonic snakes just then, so he had somewhat avenged the deaths of many of the crewmen. Thus, Yang Tiecheng's impression of Ling Han was much better than his impression of the others. A chilly look flashed across Ling Han's face as he swept his gaze across Luo Wu and Fan Yong. He had been blasted into the sea by these 2 people, and, if it weren't for his black tower, it was very likely that he would have died. He was definitely going to kill these 2 people. What are you looking at? Luo Wu said coldly. Now that it had come to this, he couldn't be bothered hiding his animosity toward Ling Han any longer. After all, it was up in the air whether they could make it back to the shore alive at all. The main problem was that they were drifting along far too slowly. If they were unfortunate enough to come across some demonic beast, there was a strong possibility that they would all lose their lives in this sea. In Luo Wu and Fan Yong's minds, this was all Ling Han's fault. If it wasn't because of him, why would they have come here in the first place? Of course, they would never reflect on their own actions. If they hadn't been hellbent on killing Ling Han, would it ever have come to this? I'm looking to see how you'll die. Ling Han replied icily. He used his body like a bow and his origin power as an arrow as he aimed his annihilating dragon star arrow at Luo Wu. A cold chill instantly gripped at Luo Wu's heart. There had been an elite at the Sun-Moon tier leading him and Luo Yu, so killing Ling Han should have been an extremely easy task. However, Luo Sunyun had been unable to board the ship, and Luo Yu had suffered a wretched death, being eaten by the gigantic fish. Only he was left out of the initial group of 3. Now, Ling Han's arrow was pointing at him, yet he surprisingly lacked the confidence to defend himself facing this threat. A major reason for this was because the environment was extremely detrimental to his abilities. Otherwise, he would be able to unleash his movement techniques and completely evade Ling Han's aim. However, the flotsam they were on was only so big, so how could he evade? Jump into the sea? If he expended all of his energy and sunk to the bottom of the sea, there was a possibility that the seabed would be his eternal burial ground. Luo Wu was fairly quick-witted, and he immediately skirted behind Fu Tian's back. He was evidently using this youth as his shield. Fu Tian was infuriated. Like an enraged beast, he roared, "Fuck off. Don't worry, little friend. There's no hostility between you two, so he definitely won't shoot you." Of course, Luo Wu wouldn't give up so easily. If they were on land, he would be completely unafraid of Ling Han. However, he was on the back foot now, and there was also very little room for him to hide. Thus, he naturally wasn't willing to take any risks. Yang Taiching humphed, and scolded, absolutely shameless. He waved and grabbed with his right hand, placing Fu Tian behind himself and leaving Luo Wu in front of himself. Luo Wu's expression changed drastically. He had become an easy target again. "Captain Yang, I paid you a fee to board, so you have to ensure my safety." Luo Wu shouted hurriedly. "We've already been shipwrecked, so my responsibilities have also become void," Yang Taiching said coldly. "I'll naturally refund and compensate everyone when we make it back to the harbor." "Wrong, wrong, wrong." Luo Wu pointed at his feet as he shook his head, and said, "Look, Captain, we're still on the ship. Even if it's only a fragment, it's still a part of the ship. You're still the captain, so you're obligated to ensure your passengers' safety." He was indeed a shameless person, yet his words did hold some truth. Moreover, Yang Taiching was a sucker for righteousness, and his expression instantly became hesitant. "Ling Han, don't attack him," Yang Taiching said. He blocked Luo Wu behind him. "Ha ha ha." Luo Wu chortled loudly, appearing extremely smug. There was Yang Taiching to protect him on the ship, and once they made it out of this situation, there would be no need for him to be afraid of Ling Han anymore. Yang Taiching suddenly turned around and grabbed Luo Wu by the neck. He was an entire minor level above Luo Wu, and he also had a battle prowess of 2 stars, even though the effects of his secret technique had already disappeared. So, how could Luo Wu block his sudden strike? Luo Wu's smug laughter was instantly caught in his throat. As his neck was being gripped tightly, his face was rapidly becoming beet red. Although cultivators could stay alive without breathing, the circulation of their origin power would also be cut if their necks were to be locked in a tight grip. If they were trapped in such a situation for too long, their spirit would still end up dying. Luo Wu flailed about as he tried to escape from Yang Taiching's stranglehold. However, this was to no avail, and he only felt more and more unwell. "Although I won't allow Ling Han to kill you, I won't gloss over the fact that you two purposefully blasted him into the sea either." Yang Taiching reached out and lifted Fan Yong by the neck as well. The two of them squirmed violently, yet neither of them was a match for Yang Taiching. They could only flail about helplessly. "Humph. When we disembark this ship, I'll personally deal with you two first," Yang Taiching said coldly. He forcefully flung his arms outward. "Pa!" Luo Wu and Fan Yong were both dripping with cold sweat as their bottoms plunked onto the wreckage. They felt as if they had walked to death's doors and back. Their heads remained lowered as all kinds of cruel thoughts flashed through their minds. Chapter 10:17, Wanting to Forge the Strongest Sword. The two broken pieces of the ship were now like two small rafts, bearing the fortunate survivors as they floated on the huge sea. They were trying hard to return to the marine routes of the Yang clan. Then, only 3 days would be needed, at most, and they would meet with another ship from the Yang clan and be saved. However, they had survived a great disaster, yet they did not meet their good fortune one. Not long after, they encountered a stormy sea that turned them all dizzy and caused them to lose any sense of direction. When it was calm again, Yuanxiang took out his compass for a look, and discovered that they were extremely far away from the normal marine routes. There was nothing else that could be done. They could only row as much as possible to return to their original marine route. Thankfully, all of them were elites of immortal level, and thus there was no need to worry about problems like food and water. Soon, night fell. Everyone took their turns to rest, but none of them dared to be too relaxed, because everyone was trying to outwit everybody else, so who would really be trustworthy among them? At dawn, a red sun leaped out of the horizon, incredibly magnificent. There seems to be a ship. A black dot appeared ahead of them. Everyone focused their gazes and looked in one direction, and there indeed was something floating on the surface of the sea. Be careful, it could be pirates. Yuanxiang exclaimed. This place was completely distanced from the marine routes of the Yang clan's fleet. The ships belonging to the Yang clan would definitely not appear here unless by complete accident. Hence, the possibility that it was a pirate ship was extremely high. That's not right. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, and shook his head. He said, "That's not a ship. Instead, it's an island." The reason why it looked like a ship was because this island was too far away from them. An island. Everyone felt invigorated. If they got on the island, they would be able to reorganize. At least, they could make a few real oars, or they could even create a sail. It would be better than now, at least. They rowed once more to advance. After quite a long while of rowing, that island was also becoming gradually bigger in front of their eyes, and finally, they could see it clearly. That was indeed an island, and it was a very big one. This stunned quite a few of them. How could Ling Han's sight be so good? Another long while passed, and they finally landed on the beach. We'll move separately. One day later, we will gather back here. We will collect all materials that can be used, Yuanxiang said. He stored away the 2 broken pieces of his ship to prevent anyone from leaving by themselves and leaving everyone else on the island. Ability-wise, he was the strongest. He was also the captain, so naturally, he would be the one calling the shots. Furthermore, he was more trustworthy. Otherwise, it didn't matter who got a hold of these 2 boats, for the others would not be at ease. Luo Wu and Fan Yong exchanged a look. After their shared trial, they had formed an alliance. Now that everyone was moving separately, they naturally had their eye on Ling Han. Unfortunately, Yuanxiang chose to go with Ling Han, which caused the duo's plan to tail and kill him secretly to completely fizzle out. Actually, Ling Han was feeling a bit sorry too. He still had the Crimson Ground locking net which he had not used yet, so even against a cultivator in the high extreme, he would be unafraid. Moreover, he could stun his opponent with the 7-kill subduing soul technique, and draw them into the Black Tower, so he was assured of victory against any cultivator in the high extreme. This island was very big, and had a narrow, elongated shape. They were now at about 1/3 of the island. Hence, they separated into 2 groups. One group would head east, while the other group would head west. The island was covered with dense jungle, and each tree was at least 300 meters tall, with huge leaves. Hence, If one were to walk underneath the trees, there was practically no light that could penetrate the canopy, making it appear extremely spooky. Ling Han's group had 6 people. Aside from himself and Shui Yanyu, there was also Yang Taicheng, Yin Yuanxiang, Fu Tian, and Jin Zhihui. Very obviously, Yang Taicheng had separated Ling Han from his enemies. "Brother Jin, you keep holding onto a sword, don't you feel tired?" Ling Han asked the young man who was hugging his sword after they had set out. Jin Zhihui shook his head, and replied, "Only when I experience the feelings of the sword at all times would I be able to forge an excellent sword." Was he a sword maniac? Shui Yanyu suddenly twitched slightly, and asked, "Could it be Brother Jin comes from the Swordforge Manor?" If it was another man, being the focus of attention from a seductive beauty like Shui Yanyu, he would probably be completely dizzy with ecstasy. However, Jin Zhihui did not have the slightest bit of reaction. He merely hugged his sword as if it was his true love. "Indeed, I do come from the Swordforge Manor," he answered with a nod, appearing not to have the slightest bit of subtlety. "As expected." Shui Yanyu nodded. All members of the Swordforge Manor had the surname Jin. "What Swordforge Manor?" Ling Han asked. The Swordforge Manor is the most acclaimed holy land of weaponsmiths on the Joint Peace Planet. However, this manor only forges swords, and does not forge any other types of weapons. The blades they forge are not only sharp and sturdy, quite a number of them also has their own unique attributes, Shui Yanyu explained. Every swordsman would be proud of having a sword from the Swordforge Manor. "So awesome?" Ling Han couldn't help but smile and ask, "Brother Jin, if I obtain the materials in the future, can I ask you to forge my sword?" Yang Taicheng couldn't help but shake his head. He had naturally heard of the Swordforge Manor, and also knew that the people from this manor were very strange. They were obviously famous all over the world, yet did not care the slightest bit about money or power. They were too busy forging their swords. However, though they enjoyed forging swords, it was up to their mood whom they would be willing to forge a sword for. Some had paid astronomical amounts and it was still useless, whereas some people needed not pay a single cent and would be gifted a sword of their own. Since Ling Han had spoken so rashly like this, he was probably going to meet with a merciless refusal from Jin Zhihui. "Okay," Jin Zhihui said, nodding without hesitation. "Pooh." Yang Taicheng almost choked. Wasn't it said that everyone from the Swordforge Manor had weird temperaments? How could he have agreed so easily? Jin Zhihui scratched his head, and said a bit shyly, "However, I have not forged a single sword yet." Fuck. No wonder he had agreed so readily, he should only be an apprentice. Yet Ling Han laughed loudly, and clapped a hand on his shoulder, and said, "Then, it's decided. In the future, my sword will be up to you. Are you not afraid I will waste your materials?" Jin Zhihui asked in surprise. When others heard him say this, they were likely to shake their heads directly. Even those who gave him some face would change the topic and no longer speak of the matter of forging a sword. Ling Han said, "With what you said earlier about wanting to experience the feelings of a sword, I am certain you can forge an excellent, supreme sword." Jin Zhihui couldn't help but feel excited. Even in the Swordforge Manor, he had never gotten the approval of a single person. Even his father merely advised him not to daydream. Only this man in front of him approved of it. Most importantly, though his idea of experiencing the feelings of a sword was something he'd said himself, hearing it from Ling Han's mouth gave him the feeling like he had encountered an intimate friend. "All right. In the future, I will definitely forge a supreme sword for you." He clenched his fists, his eyes shining. Previously, he had spoken little, but now it seemed like his vocal box had been opened. He thought of Ling Han as an intimate friend, and spoke endlessly. "Brother Ling, I want to forge the strongest sword in this world," he exclaimed. Chapter 1018, Giant Pit. The strongest sword? Ling Han was surprised. This was not something to be said easily. Did the strongest exist in this world? There would always be a mountain taller than the last. There was only talk of a stronger existence, so where would this strongest sword come from? Yang Taiching and the others shook their heads as well. The talk of the strongest should only be the naive thoughts of a child. The strongest sword. Jin Zhihui shook his head continuously. I will definitely forge the strongest sword. How? Ling Han was very intrigued. Jin Zhihui's whole head was filled with forging swords, and now that he thought of Ling Han as an intimate friend, he would naturally not mind sharing a secret with him. He thus said, I am studying a kind of material. If I can successfully refine it, there is hope of forging the strongest sword. Pooh! Yang Taiching and the others were all disdainful. What material would be that awesome? If there really was this kind of material, what would be left for you to study? It would have long since been snatched away by others. Yet Jin Zhihui did not spare these people a look. Instead, he minded his own business, and said, this is a king of materials that has endless possibilities of improvement. You see, when we forge a sword, no matter how much effort we expend, it would still be limited by the material that it is forged from. True. Ling Han nodded. You could not possibly forge a piece of level 1 godly metal into a level 2 god tool, as the material itself determined that it was impossible. However, if I could extract that kind of material, that kind of essence, and forge it into a weapon, it would be able to automatically swallow other materials or god tools. From level 1 to level 2, from level 2 to level 3, there would be endless room for improvement, Jin Zhihui explained excitedly. Instantly, the eyes of Yang Taiching and the others all widened. Even their mouths were about to fly open, they were that dumbstruck. A god tool that had endless room for improvement? Putting aside actually making it reality, the mere thought of it was enough to chill the spine. Would any other person think of this kind of fantastical story? If a god tool like that really appeared, the whole world would experience a revolution because of it. Ling Han was also stunned. Then, he put his hand on Jin Zhihui's shoulder heavily. Brother Jin, you are definitely a genius without compare. Jin Zhihui looked absolutely touched. When he related this theory to his clansmen, even when his father heard it, all he received was mockery and ridicule. Even his father, who had the highest opinion of him, advised him to give up such an unrealistic idea. Brother Ling, do you believe I can forge that kind of sword? He asked. Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, if you don't try, then there really won't be the slightest bit of possibility, but if you work at it, then even if there was only a 1 in a million chance of success, there is still at least a sliver of hope. Yes. 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 Jin Zhihui continued to nod his head. Ling Han's words had really touched his heart, causing him to feel as if he had met an intimate friend, and he wanted nothing more than to completely devote himself to Ling Han. Meanwhile, Yang Taiching and the others lost interest. The strongest sword sounded very awesome, but no matter how they thought about it, it was an impossible endeavor. Brother Ling, after I forge this divine sword, I will send it to you. Jin Zhihui said. He loved forging swords, but was no swordsman himself. In truth, all the members of the Sword Forge Manor were outstanding masters of the hammer because they needed to wave their hammers endlessly when they were forging weapons. On the other hand, they were not accustomed to using swords. Then I'll be waiting, Ling Han said with a smile. Jin Zhihui nodded seriously. Because he had met with a bottleneck, he wanted to travel around to improve his mood and seek some inspiration. The deathly battles these few days had given him quite a bit of comprehension. However, though he had no worldly experience, he was no idiot himself. Hence, he did not speak out any bit about this fact. He had made his decision. After he returned, he would cultivate in seclusion, and after he came out of seclusion, who knew, he might have solved all the problems plaguing him, and he would be able to forge the strongest divine sword in history. The group of 6 walked in the dark jungle. However, all of a sudden, a wide space appeared ahead of them, revealing the blinding sunlight, and the 6 people gaped at the same time due to their intense shock. Ahead of them, there actually appeared an incomparably massive deep pit. This pit was overwhelmingly huge. It occupied about 1/3 of the island, and its incredible depth was unfathomable. The walls of the pit were completely steep, without the slightest bit of foothold, as smooth as a mirror. It was like a pillar that connected to the heavens had stabbed this place, and left behind such a hollow between heaven and earth. This was too sudden. Just 1 step ago, they had still been in the jungle, but in the space of a single step, the jungle had disappeared, and this kind of steep cliff had appeared. If they had not been careful, they would have directly taken the wrong step and fallen in. It should be known that the gravity in this region was frighteningly huge, and there was no use for flight god tools. If one actually fell into this kind of deep pit, then it was really unknown whether he would be able to ever come out again. It was not that scary out at sea, because the gradient out at sea was relatively gentle. One would only need to travel in a specific direction, and there would come a day when he would be able to reach shore. But here? If one fell in, there was a high possibility that he would never come out again. They all stretched out their heads and looked down from the edge of the steep cliff, and could only see that the bottom was an unfathomably deep darkness, just as if it could reach the core of the Joint Peace Planet. If that was true, then even an elite of the heavenly body tier would die if he fell in. The divine flame inside the planet was definitely capable of turning even an elite of the heavenly body tier to ashes. When they stretched out their heads to look, they were still affected by gravity. They quickly retreated back to safety. If they lost balance and fell in, they would be done for. "Lord Yang, have you heard of this island?" Ling Han asked. Yang Taicheng looked completely astonished. He shook his head slowly, and answered, "Apologies. Although the Yang clan is known as the overlord of the Star Sea, I did not know that such an island existed." Sure enough, even the Yang clan did not know. All of them were silent. All of a sudden, this island was shrouded in a veil of mystery, and though the mystery would cause one to feel curiosity, at the same time, it also symbolized unknown dangers. Ling Han chopped down a huge tree, and then threw it into the deep pit. Xiao, the huge tree fell down, and very soon became a little black dot. Then, it was swallowed by the darkness inside the deep pit, and there was soon no sign of it. There was no sound of impact to be heard even after a very long time. "The bottom is not connected with the sea," Ling Han said. Everyone nodded. Though they had climbed some slopes along their way on this island, the sea level was definitely not that low. They should have long since heard the sound of the tree splashing into the sea. If it was connected with the sea, then they would only need to enter and explore. They would still be able to find a water channel that connected to the sea, and then find some way to go ashore. But, the current situation was that this pit was very possibly tens of thousands of meters deep. That was too frightening. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, but it was of no use. He still could not see to the bottom. Huh! Yang Taicheng was the first to look guarded. Very quickly, Ling Han and the others went on the alert as well, and looked towards their left. Voila! 3 people suddenly walked out of the dense jungle. It was not Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Lu Ying, but rather 3 young men. They were seated respectively on a tiger, wolf, and panther. However, upon another look, one would realize that these 3 fierce beasts were not real animals. Instead, they were forged from metal, and could not really be considered all that full of life. One only need to take a closer look, and would realize that they were not real animals. Puppeteers! Yang Taicheng and the others exclaimed simultaneously. Chapter 1019, Earth's Core Island. In the immortal realm, there were various kinds of cultivators with special abilities. The most commonly seen, and possessing the highest status, were naturally alchemists. That was because if you did not have a weapon, you could still buy a piece of godly metal, and no matter how much you tormented it, you would still be able to forge a usable weapon with it. Then, with constant use over a long time, your own martial intent would be instilled in this weapon. In fact, it could completely be used like a god tool itself. Furthermore, it would be a god tool that only belonged to you. In the immortal realm, the definition of a god tool was a weapon that anyone could activate, possessing power on the immortal level. Thus, the difference between a weapon that one had personally nurtured and a god tool was that one could only be used by yourself, and would only be a piece of trash in anyone else's hands, whereas the other could be used in anyone's hands as long as they possessed enough power to activate it. We're getting off topic. Weaponsmiths naturally belonged to the category of cultivators with special abilities. They could engrave unique formation patterns on weapons, as well as other complicated objects, so that the weapons would have great power like cultivators themselves. Because of that, weaponsmiths did not have a low status, either. Every cultivator would desire a weapon that they were better at using. Besides, weaponsmiths could also create armor. With the increase in defenses, one would only have endless possibilities brought by being alive, after all. Aside from them, there were also formation masters. The great formation of the imperial capital, for example, was created by a formation grandmaster. Their status was extremely high in the joint peace planet. Even the three great emperors would be very respectful when in their presence. Next was a group of cultivators with special abilities that belonged to a very rarely seen group, such as diviners, astrologers, and puppeteers. Puppeteers could make an inanimate object look like it was alive. In the imperial capital, the creations of puppeteers could also be seen, such as a very small number of horse-drawn carriages, wherein the horsepower were not demonic beasts, but rather puppets. Those comprised of weaponsmithing, formation techniques, and there was even some alchemy in the mix, which made it extremely complicated. Hence, there were pitifully few puppeteers. Those puppet-drawn carriages in the imperial capital were not produced in this era, but rather merely remnants from who knew how long ago. Thus, when they saw three people mounting puppets suddenly appear on the island, Yang Taicheng and the others were naturally astonished. This was a deserted island, and furthermore, there was a shockingly colossal pit here. Now, even puppeteers had appeared. This was really too bizarre. Ha ha ha, I never thought that guests would come to this island, the young man on the lion said. We sensed some movement previously, and thought that something had gone wrong with the mechanical birds. We never imagined that there would actually really be guests. Yang Taicheng, as the ship captain, was naturally unwilling to delegate his responsibility to others. With clasped hands, he said, "We have encountered a storm, and drifted here. May I ask what exactly this place is?" "This is Earth's core island," the young man on the tiger replied, smiling. He pointed at the deep pit on the side. "We call this Earth's core cave, and apparently, it can reach the core of the planet." "Oh, right. I am Guoxiuan, and these two are my junior brothers, Ning Tai and Tong Yulong. Greetings, everyone." Ning Tai and Tong Yulong both clasped their hands in greeting. Ling Han and the others gave their names as well, introducing themselves. "So you have encountered the attack of a demonic beast, which crashed into your ship, and that is why you have floated here." Guoxiuan nodded, and continued, "This island is a place for living in seclusion, and the people on the island have no intention to barge into the outside island. Instead, men would farm, whereas women weave as we enjoy a life of peace. Everyone, please come to rest at our village first. We'll see if we can build a ship for you all and send you off," Ning Tai continued. "However, we are already accustomed to peace, so we request you all to keep the location of this island a secret and not leak it out, leading to the destruction of our peaceful lives," Tong Yulong continued. Yang Taicheng and the others nodded in response. "We still have 3 companions. Though Yang Taicheng was not fond of Luo Wu and Fan Yong, as the ship's captain, he was still responsible. Understood, we still have 2 of our junior brothers who have headed over. You can meet them at the village, Guoxiuan said, smiling. Yang Taicheng nodded. Everyone, please come with us. Guoxiuan moved the tiger he was riding on, and slowly headed downhill. They all followed behind him, and after walking for about an hour, they finally passed through the dense jungle. A valley appeared ahead of them. The sides of the valley were steep, with mountains in all directions, and there was only a very narrow and small entrance. 1 man guarded the pass, and even 10,000 wouldn't be able to break through. This thought flashed past in Ling Han's head. As long as a single elite was here as overseer, then even if there was an army outside, they would not be able to enter. However, at the same time, as long as there was an elite blocking the way here, the people inside would not be able to come out as well. The entrance was not guarded. Instead, there were only 2 stone statues. One was an 8-legged spider, whereas the other was a large bird whose wings were stretched out. One could see how robust its claws were, as they were even wider than a human arm. They entered into the valley, and instantly, the valley became wide, revealing a beautiful picture. This place had multiple farms, which formed a circular pattern, and in the middle, there was a very, very large village. The bridges, flowing water, and houses were filled with the beauty of the countryside. Seeing this scene so abruptly would cause one to forget the cruelty of battle and the bloody reek of power, and only feel at ease and absolved of worries. This is a really good place. Yang Taicheng said sincerely. Would I be able to enjoy my retirement here in future? Guoxiuan laughed, and replied, if Brother Yang decides to live in seclusion, why not? However, I have to remind you all, please forget your identities as cultivators after coming here. We strictly forbid fighting here, and no matter if you are in the heavenly body tier or in the shattering void tier, in this place, you would only be a farmer or a weaver. Everyone nodded. Every place had its own rules. A powerful dragon couldn't defeat a snake in its nest. What more when they were freeloaders? In the farms, they could see people guiding cows as they plowed the land, and there were some transplanting rice seedlings as well, looking busy yet relaxed. They walked on the small path between the farms, and entered into the village. There were a few scattered people walking on the streets. The majority stayed indoors, with some watering their plants, and some sunbathing. There was also smoke rising from cooking, with the whole place appearing incredibly peaceful and serene. The people here are fond of quiet, so I would ask all of you not to disturb others. After everyone came here, they have forgotten who they previously were, Guoxiuan reminded once more. After walking some more, they came to the center of the village. There was a manor that occupied a large area. It was about the size of a third of the whole village, and was surrounded by walls. The main doors were open, and a huge courtyard appeared as soon as they entered. Limestone tiles were laid out there, making it appear a bit like a martial training court, though not one person was training. Everyone, I will first make arrangements for your accommodations. My master is fond of creating various rare, unusual objects, and every time he embarks on a project, it could take him quite a number of days. Thus, you may have to wait for a good number of days to be able to see him, Guoxiuan said apologetically. Everyone said they did not mind. If they did not get help, they would be drifting for who knew how many days in the large, empty sea before finally being able to return to the marine routes of the Yang clan. Hence, they would not mind waiting a few days here. Guoxiuan led them to the eastern part of the manor. There was a large number of small courtyards here, and he allocated them to everyone respectively. After all the arrangements were done, Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Lu Ying were also led here by 2 young men. Those 2 young men were Guoxiuan's junior brothers. One was called Shui De, and the other was called Bu Zhengyun. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu stayed in one of the courtyards. Anyways, with the Black Tower, they did not care about the condition of their accommodations. At this time, the sky had darkened as well. Extremely strange. Ling Han said. Chapter 1020, Strangeness. What's so strange? Shui Yenyu drew out a bamboo chair and sat down as she enjoyed this astonishing serenity. There was the sound of wind and leaves, peace, and serenity here, causing her to forget the disputes of the outside world. I say, wife, have you stayed so long in the imperial capital that you have become dumb? Ling Han asked, grinning. I don't want to speak with a damn pervert. Shui Yenyu closed her eyes, looking like she was about to take a catnap. Ling Han snickered, walked over, and picked her up off her seat. Then, he sat down himself, held her in his arms, and began exploring the secluded, beautiful scenery of her body without any reservations. Woo, Shui Yenyu released a moan in embarrassment. This guy was really too bad. Now, her weaknesses had already been gripped tightly in his hands, and he could instantly cause her will to crumble, causing her to sink into that captivating yet embarrassing *** sensation. Wife, this place of yours seems to have become bigger. Ling Han said quietly by her ear. Would that be my credit? Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes angrily at him. Wasn't it because he was fond of playing around with that place? And he dared call it a credit. Pay, damn pervert. Remove your dirty hand. She made a pretense of aloofness. How could Ling Han be willing to retreat? Now that he had occupied those two high peaks, he still continued to switch from one to another, intending to divide his attention equally and treat them both the same to avoid one being bigger than the other, affecting the aesthetic quality of it. Every time he said that, it would naturally result in Shui Yenyu rolling her eyes at him as she used her fists to punch him. Wife, have you really not found anything strange about this place? Ling Han kissed her slender snow-white nape. A hint of fragrance entered his nostrils, her snowy skin smooth and glowing. Whether it was the touch of his hands, or his lips, it was indescribably wonderful. Shui Yenyu only felt her whole body had gone completely soft as she groaned miserably in her heart. Repeatedly, this damn pervert would take liberties with her. How much longer would she be able to maintain her reservedness? She was probably about to raise her white flag in surrender, and take the initiative to share a night of pleasure with this damn pervert, wasn't she? With you doing this to me, how would I be able to think properly? She asked in annoyance. Ling Han couldn't help but feel his heart flutter, and said, the word doing is really well said. It made me suddenly want to further discuss the meaning of life with you. Damn pervert. It was apparent that Shui Yenyu's art of insulting others had not improved much. It had only increased from 1 word to 2 words, but the main style was practically unchanged. Ling Han laughed loudly. You have stayed too long in the imperial capital, so you do not know how dangerous the outside world could be. True, the imperial capital is filled more with power struggles than anything else, and you would not be qualified to be drawn into such disputes either. You speak as if you understand everything. Shui Yenyu quickly grabbed Ling Han's hand. This guy actually wanted to untie her robes, he was really too perverted. Ling Han squeezed her peaks lightly, and easily crumbled the resistance of this seductive beauty. He admired Shui Yenyu's beautiful, naked body. It was as white as jade, but also seemed to be carved out of ivory, beautiful without equal. Wife, don't you think that this place is too strangely quiet? What's so strange about it? Shui Yenyu practically moaned. As a breeze blew past, her hair waved slightly, and her jade-like skin reflected a magnificent glow under the moonlight, captivating the heart and soul. From the moment we entered the village, not one person spared another look at us, Ling Han said. Didn't they already explain? After coming here, everyone has left behind their previous identities, and only wishes to enjoy a life of peace. Shui Yenyu, on the other hand, did not find anything odd about that. Ling Han smiled, and said, it is one thing to enjoy a life of peace, but if a group of strangers suddenly appeared in your home, at the very least you would pay some attention to it. You would definitely not ignore them altogether. Shui Yanyu was slightly stunned, her beautiful eyes suddenly snapping open. Yet, she discovered that her upper body was completely bare. That damn pervert was currently admiring the curves of her body, her high peaks and deep valley. Immediately, she flushed in embarrassment, and quickly pulled her clothing over to cover herself up. Yet how could such beautiful scenery be covered? Instead, her half-covered image increased the temptation she posed, causing Ling Han to swallow repeatedly. He suddenly had the urge to carry this seductive beauty into the house and begin his conquest. However, Shui Yanyu currently was just a bit embarrassed. After all, now that Ling Han had taken advantage of her so many times, she was slightly used to it as well. She said, "It is indeed a bit odd." Furthermore, Ling Han continued with a serious face. "Have you discovered that there is not one child in this village? I have looked over, and this place has not only elderly. There is a considerable number of young people too." Leaving behind their battles and aggression did not mean that they would leave behind even that as well. Just think about it, if we farm in the day, besides having fun at night, what else could be done here? Shui Yenyu's small mouth gaped. She had indeed been shocked. This guy's previous words had caused a bit of a chill to race up her spine, but why had he suddenly jumped onto that topic? What kind of logical thought process did he have? True enough, he was a pervert by nature, and she had not addressed him wrongly. But when she thought further, she felt that Ling Han's words were very logical. It was a peaceful village, but why were there no children? In the real countryside, it should be young people working in the field while the elderly were sitting the courtyards, and the children would be playing around in the village. Damn pervert, can you stop moving around? You're touching so much that I can't think properly. Shui Yanyu could not help but exclaim in annoyance. This guy's large hands had been wreaking havoc on her breasts all this while, causing her to feel flustered. I swear by my conscience, I merely want this pair of sisters to grow bigger quickly. Ling Han declared seriously as he gripped her breasts. Shameless. Shui Yanyu was about to pass out. How did she end up with such an undependable man? Ling Han laughed, and finally retreated as he said, "Then we'll wait until night when it's all quiet. Even if I die, I will not let you have your way." Shui Yanyu had gotten a scare, thinking that this guy had finally lost his patience and was planning to devour her. In truth, she actually was prepared for that kind of thing to happen, but she was a woman, after all. No matter what, she had to be reserved. Ling Han was startled, and shook his head as he said, "You asterisk, what is your head filled with?" "I was saying, when it's night and quiet, we'll go out to take a look around, and see what's going on." Shui Yanyu finally realized that she had misunderstood Ling Han, and couldn't help but blush furiously. However, when she saw the mischievous grin on Ling Han's face, she knew that this guy had definitely baited her into it. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand and pinch heavily the soft flesh at Ling Han's waist. "You, damn, pervert." The couple was lovey-dovey for a little while longer, and finally stood up reluctantly. After tidying up their attire, they quietly walked out the doors. Where are the both of you heading at such a late hour?" They had just exited their side courtyard when they saw Chueda come out of the shadows, riding a white elephant. This white elephant was naturally a puppet as well. It was 6 meters tall, and as its trunk waved around, one would find it difficult to distinguish if it was a real elephant in the darkness. "The scenery here is so beautiful and quiet, so we wanted to take a walk," Ling Han answered. The people here are fond of quiet, particularly at night. It would not be nice to disturb the others when they rest." Chueda shook his head. "The two of you had better return quickly to rest as well." Shui Yenyu's hand shook slightly, and she was just about to draw out her divine sword, yet Ling Han stretched out an arm to curl around her slender waist, and his hand tightened its grip. She had already developed a kind of tacit understanding with Ling Han, and knew the latter was signaling her to be patient. "All right, we will go back," Ling Han said with a smile, and shook his head slightly at Shui Yenyu. Chapter 1021, Island Master Page. It's strange, and too suspicious. Shui Yenyu declared immediately when they had returned to their own courtyard. Ling Han nodded, and exclaimed, "My wife is brilliant." Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him in annoyance, and asked, "You are showing off your foresight, aren't you? All my achievements are inevitably linked to the teachings of my wife, you. Aren't you my teacher?" Ling Han asked, smiling. Shui Yenyu's beautiful face involuntarily flushed. She had indeed been Ling Han's teacher for a while, and in the end, Ling Han was close to dragging her into bed by now. Though the two of them were not master and disciple, but rather teacher and student, the mere thought of it still caused her much embarrassment. That Chueda obviously did not want us to go and investigate. According to him, the people here are accustomed to resting early, so how could he possibly be standing guard there at such a late hour at night otherwise? He is obviously monitoring us. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Unfortunately, I am, by nature, a curious person. The more you do not want me to know, the more I want to find out." This time, Shui Yenyu was supportive of Ling Han, and asked, "Then will we be sneaking out again later?" "No, we're sleeping," Ling Han answered with a grin. Shui Yenyu was about to be driven mad. "Have you begun your huge skips in logical thought process again?" Ling Han kissed her, and replied, "On this first day, it is both the time when our curiosity is the strongest, as well as the time when the other side is the most guarded. I think the 5 people on the island should be guarding us. Unless we plan to completely become hostile with them immediately, we could not possibly leave tonight." "Tomorrow, then?" Shui Yenyu asked. "We'll play it by ear." Ling Han answered seriously. This valley was easy to guard, but difficult to assault. There was only a single way of entry and exit, and it was a naturally formed place of danger. Since they had already taken the initiative to enter into this trap, they definitely could not be rash or reckless. Shui Yenyu nodded. She was gradually leaning more and more towards having Ling Han make the decisions and take the lead in matters. Just in case, they still entered into the Black Tower. Shui Yenyu began cultivating, whereas Ling Han continued to concoct his heavenly pearl pill. He definitely had to finish concocting this alchemical pill as soon as possible. Not only would it speed up the advancement of his cultivation level, it would also bring him a high income. Cultivation was naturally inseparable from money to support it. At the beginning, it had been gold and silver, followed by origin crystals, and now, it had become true origin stones, but in essence, they were the same. As the night passed, Ling Han revealed a smile of satisfaction. He was getting closer and closer to success. The couple exited the Black Tower, and they walked out of their courtyard after having their breakfast. In the case of Yang Taicheng and the others, some had had a good night's sleep, and appeared to be energetic and awake. Others, though, were still looking weary. It was obvious that they had not slept very well the night before. After all, those like Yang Taicheng, Fan Yong, and the others, who had had a wealth of experience of journeying outside, knew the dangers of the world, and would definitely not trust anyone so easily. In contrast, Jin Zhihui and the others lacked that kind of alertness in this area, and slept very soundly the night before. They gathered again. Luo Wu and Fan Yong made no attempt to conceal their killing intent towards Ling Han. However, they were now freeloaders, and added with the fact that Yang Taicheng was here, they did not dare make a move on Ling Han. "Everyone, it is really a coincidence. My master just happened to come out of seclusion today, and wishes to see you all." Guo Xiaofan walked over. Naturally, he was still riding on that puppet tiger, just as if he had no idea how to walk without that toy. However, on the other hand, puppets could be considered god tools that could awaken themselves. Since he was riding around on a puppet all day, was he also carefully guarding against them? Then we must definitely visit Lord Island Master, they all replied, smiling. Master is a very brilliant puppeteer, and is skilled at creating various rare and unusual objects. With Master's help, we will definitely be able to create an excellent, well-built ship which will safely allow you to leave here, Xiaofan said. These words immediately moved their hearts. None of them had any plans of living in seclusion in the woods. With Xiaofan leading the way, they arrived at the main hall of the manor. It was really a great hall. It was over 30 meters wide, and as tall as 15 meters, just like a palace. In the innermost part of the main hall, an old man was seated. He should be the master of Xiaofan and his junior brothers. The old man had a very tall build. Even if he was seated, he was as tall as an ordinary man who was standing. He could practically match Yuanxiang's size. I am Pei Ji. The old man did not stand up, and merely nodded at them. Then, smiling, he said, I am not being rude here. I have long since lost my legs, so I cannot stand. He lifted his long robes. True enough, the part of his legs beneath the knee was gone, and thinking back on his words, they should have been chopped off by another, or perhaps some accident had happened to cause his handicap. He was not born a cripple. It's all right, it's fine. Everyone quickly shook their heads. Pei Ji said, I already know what you have gone through. I just so happen to have some materials on hand, so I will spend a few days' time to build a small ship for all of you. It will take me 5 days at minimum, and 10 days at most. After I am done, I will inform you. In these few days' time, you can all take a good rest and enjoy a life of peace. Thank you, Lord Island Master. They were all very glad. He was a puppeteer, so he would definitely have a pair of skillful hands. Pei Ji nodded. If you are interested in the process of puppet construction, you may chat with my disciples. I, too, hope that this art could be developed and promoted to allow more people to learn it. When these words were said, everyone was pleasantly surprised. Puppetry and ultimate martial arts techniques were the same, and belonged to the category of secret treasures. However, Pei Ji was actually willing to share his knowledge. His generosity was really astonishing. Even Shui Yanyu was wavering slightly. Had she and Ling Han been overly suspicious? How could this kind of person be a villain? Pei Ji chatted with them for a while longer, but it was all pointless conventional talk. Soon, he expressed that he did not want to waste any more time, and wanted to begin building the ship. Everyone was naturally pleased. The faster he got started, the better it would be, so they naturally all excused themselves. Everyone, if you are interested in the construction of puppets, you may come seek out myself and my brother disciples. We will take turns to discuss with you all, and as long as you have talent, we will definitely not keep our skill to ourselves, Xiaofan said, smiling. Everyone was greatly interested, and indicated that they would be paying them a visit. Ling Han, on the other hand, was not greedy. He was cultivating both alchemy and martial arts, and following 2 paths at the same time was enough to make him feel strained, what more when another art of puppetry would be tossed into the mix. Moreover, he was a firm believer in his own strength. No matter how strong puppets were, they were still external objects, unlike alchemy, wherein the alchemical pills he concocted could at least be used to strengthen himself. Shui Yanyu, though, wanted to take a look and see if she had talent in this area. However, she was soon dissuaded by Ling Han. He had not dismissed his worries just because of this, so to avoid any accidents, it was best if the two of them did not separate. He pulled Shui Yanyu with him out of the manor. By now, they would not have any reason to keep detaining him in the manor, right? Brother Ling and Miss Shui wished to go out. When they came to the doors of the manor, they saw Bu Zhengyun approach them, riding on a black ape. That made Ling Han even begin to suspect whether these people lost their legs as well, just like Pei Ji. Otherwise, why would they be riding on puppets all day long? That's right. We're going out for a walk since it's so rare to see such beautiful scenery, Ling Han answered, smiling. Hee, then let me accompany you both. Chapter 1022, Malice of the Puppets. Whether Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were willing or otherwise, Bu Zhengyun was obviously determined to go with them. In his words, as the host, he naturally had the duty to accompany his guests and introduce the surroundings to them. He accompanied Ling Han and Shui Yenyu. Wherever they walked to, he would be close behind. He could be considered very cordial, but could also be considered to be monitoring them closely. Initially, Ling Han had been planning to go and look around the various houses in the village, but the moment he left the main road, Bu Zhengyun would speak up to stop him from progressing further. He would stop them from going over by providing the excuse that the people here did not like being disturbed, and even forbade the couple from talking with the passers-by they saw on the streets. His attempt to conceal things only made it more conspicuous, and caused Ling Han to be even more suspicious. However, because he had no plans to have a complete falling out with the forces of the island master, Ling Han did not take any drastic actions. After taking a simple tour around outside, he returned to the manor. Luo Wu and Fan Yong had both gone to seek out Guoxiuan to learn the art of puppetry. What if they really had talent in this area? If they returned to the imperial capital after learning this art, their status would definitely advance to another level. One would be able to obtain an influential position in his clan, whereas the other would no longer have to follow Zhao Luan, and could be independent, becoming qualified to establish his own faction. Hence, the two of them were very proactive. At the beginning, Lu Ying did not seem very interested, but afterwards, it seemed like she was moved, and went out constantly. In comparison, Yang Tiecheng's whole mind was focused on returning, and only swordsmithing existed in Jin Zhihui's eyes. Meanwhile, Yuanxiang led a secluded life, and had always been very unsociable, whereas Fu Tian had completely no interest in areas outside of cultivation. Day after day passed. Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Lu Ying simply did not return, as if they had become addicted to learning the art of puppetry. By the seventh day, Guoxiuan came to invite Ling Han and Shui Yenyu to look at the puppet he was close to finishing. Ling Han did not have any interest in learning puppetry, but was very curious about the uses of puppets. Hence, he agreed readily, and went to the workshop inside the manor with Shui Yenyu. There was a total of 2 workshops here, a big one and a small one. The small workshop was Pei Ji's private area, and even his 5 disciples would have to obtain special permission before they could enter, whereas the big workshop was the very place they arrived. Pei Ji taught his disciples how to build puppets here. Usually, they would practice here as well. The workshop was separated into a considerable number of rooms, and the soundproofing was excellent here. Otherwise, with the constant hammering sounds in the workshop, would the people in other rooms still be capable of thinking in peace? In puppet construction, there is much need for care and attention, from the choice of raw materials to engraving of formation patterns and the filling of true origin stones, Guoxiuan introduced as they walked. He led Ling Han and Shui Yenyu into a room which was his personal territory. It was a huge place, and there were various materials and tools laid out all around them. I have been building a human-shaped puppet these few days, and have just about reached the final stage. This time, he was finally not riding on the tiger-shaped puppet anymore, though it was still following close at his side. Merely looking at the back, it was really no different from a real tiger, but from the front, its 2 eyes were obviously too fake. 2 red gems had been inlaid in place of the eyes. They were not real eyeballs. He pointed at a human-shaped puppet, an obsessed expression appearing on his face. This puppet was completely wrapped in white bandages, so it was only clear that this was a human-shaped puppet. However, it was indistinguishable what materials it had been built from. The achievement of a puppeteer would be building a puppet that could be passed off as real. As he touched this semi-finished puppet, he looked excited. He continued, "Please feel free to admire it." He cut open the chest of the puppet. It was completely empty inside, and 12 opposing rib bones could be clearly seen. However, they were not white in color, but rather pale gold. The bones have gone through a special process, and were inlaid with a layer of godly metal. Because the raw materials of a puppet have different levels, the levels of the godly metal are also different. In the case of this puppet, it would be sufficient to use level 3 godly metal. Guoxiuan continued to explain to Ling Han and Shui Yenyu as he quickly processed the puppet. "Look, there are formation patterns engraved on each bone. This is extremely crucial. After all, this is not a living creature, and every part could only be activated by depending on the formation patterns. Furthermore, there needs to be comprehensive consideration. Otherwise, the fist could punch out, but the feet would be retreating, and this is naturally unacceptable." Guoxiuan was full of zest, and did not care whether Ling Han and Shui Yenyu understood and were interested. He was merely talking excitedly all by himself. The last step is to insert the true origin stones in order to activate the formation patterns. He brought over a dozen true origin stones, then turned to Shui Yenyu, and said, "Miss Shui, would you like to personally insert the true origin stones to activate this puppet?" Shui Yenyu shook her head quickly. Though she knew that it was only a tool, with the idea that it was a human, she naturally felt that doing such a thing was very disgusting. Guoxiuan laughed, and did not attempt to persuade her any further. Instead, he said, "No matter what kind of powerful existence, they would have the end and die, and no matter what kind of beautiful woman, she would have the moment when she would wilt and fade." He stuffed the true origin stones into the stomach of the puppet one by one. Then, he stared at Shui Yenyu, his eyes becoming heated. "Miss Shui, you are so beautiful and captivating. With that kind of appearance, and that kind of figure, you should be frozen eternally, and should not age. Otherwise, that would be a sin." "This is unrelated to Brother Gua, I think," Ling Han interrupted. "Hee, I forgot myself and my manners." Guoxiuan quickly apologized as he closed up the chest of the puppet. Naturally, he was not using needle and thread, but rather multiple metal rings which buckled up the chest. Upon a closer look, the other end of the metal rings penetrated into the puppet's spine. "Now, please admire." He took a step back, and showed a fanatical expression. Wang, this puppet suddenly snapped its eyes open. Then, it swiftly stood. It seemed to be slightly dazed as it looked around. In that Earth's core cave, once every year or so, a kind of material would seep out. We call it divine mist, and by blending the divine mist into our puppet, an unexpected effect could be induced, such as, Guoxiuan related from the sidelines. This puppet suddenly focused on Ling Han, its gaze no longer wandering. In the slits between the bandages, its eyes could be seen to exude the light of a fearful wolf. The human-shaped puppet released a low roar, and kicking out its legs, it suddenly charged towards Ling Han. Its burst of speed was extremely swift. One of its hands stretched out, and it was visible that there were 2 fingers that had not been wrapped in bandages. They were like metal, and the tips of its fingers were incredibly sharp as they exuded a cold light. Ling Han was unafraid, and greeted the incoming attack with a punch. Pang! With that exchange of blows, Ling Han involuntarily took a few steps back, while that puppet merely shook slightly, its figure quickly regaining balance. It released another shrill roar, and charged towards Ling Han once more. Strength on the level of the middle stage of high extreme, or even late stage of high extreme of mountain river tier, Ling Han estimated. As the divine patterns of gravity activated, the puppet suddenly stumbled, and almost fell. Yet Ling Han frowned as well, feeling very strained. His opponent merely had the strength of the high extreme, yet caused him to feel so strained. Then there was only one reason for that, and that was because it was too heavy. The same effect of gravity, taking effect on a stone and a mountain, would naturally expend completely different amounts of energy. He recalled what Guoxiuan had said previously about the frame of the puppet being cast in godly metal. Its weight indeed had to be astonishing. What Ling Han did not understand was why this puppet would attack him when he obviously had not seen Guoxiuan issue any command. Hong! 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 The puppet endlessly attacked Ling Han as if it was determined to kill him. Chapter 1023, The Shocking Truth. Stop! Quickly, make it stop! Shui Yanyu shouted at Guoxiuan. She was not worried about Ling Han's safety. As long as this damn pervert could not be insta-killed, then with his recovery abilities, he was an undying existence. However, who would like being the target of attack for no reason? Guoxiuan bared his teeth in a grin, and replied, Miss Shui, I have not issued any command to attack. It is completely the will of this puppet. How could that be? Shui Yanyu asked in fury. This puppet was built by you, and if it was not by your command, why would it attack? Miss Shui, have you forgotten my earlier words? Guoxiuan was not the slightest bit angered, and said, a kind of mysterious substance would seep out of the Earth's core cave, and blending it into the puppet would produce an extremely amazing effect. Like what? Shui Yanyu calmed down. Ling Han and that puppet were currently engaged in a fierce battle. For the moment, the battle would not be so easily decided. Hence, she was not anxious. Guoxiuan showed a strange smile, and replied, for example, the materials would retain a part of their memories. Shui Yanyu was confused. What did retain a part of their memories mean? What relation did that have with its attacking Ling Han? Yet a thought streaked through Ling Han's head. This puppet could not pose a threat to him. Hence, he was completely capable of multitasking, fighting the puppet on one side whilst listening in on the conversation between Shui Yanyu and Guoxiuan. Could it be? His eyes turned cold, and he drew out the divine sword, striking fiercely. Shwa, 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 shwa. A few dozen strikes later, the pieces of cloth flew in all directions, and the bandages covering the puppet's face were torn apart, revealing its concealed face. It's, Shui Yanyu's eyes swept over it, and she couldn't help but show an incredibly stunned expression. No, it should be an expression of horror. Guoxiuan showed a smile similar to that of a demon, and replied, that's right, that's right. Just as you can see, the raw materials of this puppet have retained a considerable amount of their memories. Hence, it began its attack even when it had not received any command from me. That puppet was astonishingly Luo Wu. He had disappeared for quite a number of days, and had actually been made into a puppet? Or was it that this was a puppet that was merely an imitation of Luo Wu's features? Realization suddenly dawned on Ling Han, and he said, no wonder you did not allow us to enter into the houses of the villagers, and did not allow us to communicate with the villagers. It's because, they are all puppets. Ha 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 ha. Guoxiuan laughed loudly, and clapped his hands continuously. That's right, that's right. You have guessed correctly. You really deserve to be praised. After all, there are not many people like you that can understand it with just a little hint. Ling Han dodged and evaded endlessly. Luo Wu was currently attacking him fiercely. When he had been alive, his strongest thought was to kill Ling Han. Hence, after he had been made into a puppet, this had become his unerasable memory. You all are practically deranged. Shui Yanyu rebuked. Now, she was naturally aware that their earlier words were all lies, and they had no intention to prepare a ship for them to leave this island. Instead, they merely wanted to persuade them to stay here. Wrong, wrong. In truth, we only wanted to turn you into an eternal being. Guoxiuan said, smiling. Just think, how long would you be able to live? How many people would really be capable of breaking through to the Sun-Moon tier? At most, you would only be able to live a few 100,000 years, but in the end, wouldn't you still have to rot and decay, and return back to the earth? However, after being made into a puppet, you all would retain your current appearance eternally. Miss Shui, you are so captivating, so why don't you retain this kind of beauty eternally? He stared at Shui Yenyu, his eyes becoming fanatical. Then why don't you make yourselves into puppets? Ling Han broke free of Luo Wu, and charged towards Guoxiuan. Ong! The puppet tiger actually released a roar in rage, and the sound wave transformed into multiple circles that oscillated towards Ling Han. Ling Han's charging figure suddenly slowed down, and became slower and slower. The clothes on him were forcefully torn apart by the shock wave. Pang! He was suddenly sent flying. He couldn't help but be shocked. This puppet tiger's abilities had actually reached the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and it could even be a being in the late stage or peak stage. Since I have allowed you to discover the secret of this place, how could I have been unprepared? Guoxiuan laughed. However, rest assured. All of you will be made into puppets. Just the thought excites me. Having a puppet as beautiful as you, I would not complain no matter how many times I play with you every day. His last words were aimed at Shui Yenyu. Although this had revealed his dark, demented fetish, so what if they found out? The two of them were going to be turned into puppets shortly anyways. Shui Yenyu was both shamed and enraged, and rebuked, disgusting. I promise I will restore you completely. There would not be the slightest distortion. Guoxiuan's eyes flickered with an evil light. He had completely no interest in normal beauties. Only after they were made into a cold puppet would they incite his psychotic lust. Not just him, but his master and junior brothers were all such psychos. Who? Both Luo Wu and the puppet tiger were attacking Ling Han fiercely, especially the puppet tiger. Its battle prowess was as high as consummate level. Furthermore, it was not a real living creature, so it had no such thing as vital points. Its tendons and bones had all been rebuilt, so it was practically a beast-shaped weapon in itself. Ling Han activated the divine patterns of gravity, but immediately looked strained. That puppet tiger was even heavier than Luo Wu, and if he wanted the divine patterns of gravity to take effect, it'd be a massive test for Ling Han. With a soft shout from Shui Yenyu, she joined the battle with her sword in hand. Guoxiuan, meanwhile, did not make a move. Instead, he merely watched the show from the sidelines with crossed legs, apparently very confident in his creations. Out of these two people, one was in the early stage of the medium extreme, whereas the other was at the peak stage of the low extreme. In theory, just Luo Wu would be enough to suppress them, what more when there was still a puppet tiger that had battle prowess at the late stage of consummate level? He was standing by here merely because he feared that these two puppets would not be holding any punches and accidentally tear Shui Yenyu apart. Very soon, he looked surprised because he discovered that Ling Han's defenses were indeed quite frightening. He actually managed to still be standing after being on the receiving end of a combined attack of these two powerful puppets, which was inconceivable to him. This really is a fine material gifted by the heavens. His surprise immediately turned into great elation. His physique is incredibly tough, and would be worth having level 5 or even level 6 godly metal to recast his skeleton. Though he is only in the medium extreme of Mountain River tier, I have the confidence to carve formation patterns for the Sun-Moon tier on his bones. At that time, he would be a puppet of Sun-Moon tier. Even Master only possesses 2 pseudo-Sun-Moon tier puppets, and if I can create a Sun-Moon tier puppet, I would be able to replace him, and take hold of all the resources of this place. After killing this man, I will hide him, then lie and say that his body had been too severely damaged, hence it could not be made into a puppet. As a result, I have already gotten rid of his corpse. In any case, Master and my junior brothers only care about this woman, after all. When I have learnt the art of puppetry for the Sun-Moon tier, and suddenly erupt, I will become the new owner of this place. Xiao. Exactly at that moment, Ling Han broke through the siege, and charged towards him. To defeat the enemy, their chief had to be captured first. Chapter 1024, Absorbed. Guoxiuan didn't move, yet the puppet tiger roared as it hurriedly leaped before Ling Han. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. A ring of tiger teeth flew out, transforming into 24 daggers. Pu, 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 pu. This puppet tiger had a battle prowess at the late stage of the consummate level, so even Ling Han was no match for it. 24 tiger teeth instantly pierced into his body, causing blood to gush from his wounds. Even though his physique was extraordinarily sturdy, it was still unavoidable that he would be wounded by an opponent who had a battle prowess at the consummate level. After all, there was a huge gulf between each sub-minor level of the immortal levels. The puppet tiger sucked in a powerful breath as it attempted to retrieve the teeth that it had spat out. "In your dreams," Ling Han said with a sneer. With a thought, his divine sense wrapped around the 24 dagger-like teeth, and instantly absorbed them into the Black Tower. There was no martial intent on the teeth, so it was extremely easy for Ling Han to place them into the Black Tower. What? Guoxiuan's eyes widened in shock and surprise. How is this possible? The biggest flaw of puppets was that they didn't possess any self-awareness. Thus, it was extremely easy to place them into Spatial Spirit Tool. However, the method to mitigate this flaw was also extremely simple. That was, one could simply transform the body of the puppets into Spatial Spirit Tools as well. Indeed, only great elites at the Genesis tier could forge Spatial God Tools. But Spatial Spirit Tools? Such tools were widely available and, with a little effort, could be forged by cultivators at the Shattering Void tier. Starting from the Mountain River tier, creating a small and unstable space really couldn't be any easier. It was common sense that one spatial spirit tool couldn't absorb another. This wasn't due to storage volume, but rather due to the quality of such tools. Meanwhile, regardless of whether it was the puppet tiger or the tiger teeth that it had spat out, all of these contained an independent microspace within them. The reason for this was naturally to prevent others from absorbing them into a spatial spirit tool. But now? The 24 tiger teeth had vanished in the air. Guoxiuan racked his brains in an attempt to make sense of the situation, yet due to his limited cultivation level and knowledge, how could he ever suspect that it was a spatial god tool? Thus, he could only wallow in his shock and disbelief. Ang! The puppet tiger roared angrily, and swiped its paws at Ling Han as it ferociously lunged toward him. Ling Han also came to a sudden realization. It could be said that the Black Tower was a natural nemesis of puppets. As puppets didn't have any will or martial intent, he would be able to absorb them into the Black Tower simply by wrapping his divine sense around them. This is wonderful. He gazed at the puppet tiger, even clasping his hands behind his back as he did so. His air of arrogance was already soaring through the heavens. Meanwhile, however, his divine sense was already expanding toward the puppet tiger like a net. The speed of the puppet tiger's lunge was incredible, and any other cultivator at the medium extreme would definitely be ripped to shreds before they could even wrap their divine sense around the puppet tiger's body. After all, there was a gulf of 2 minor levels between them. Moreover, even if they were able to wrap the puppet tiger with their divine sense, it was very likely that it would be able to rip through it. However, the strength of Ling Han's divine sense was far above his cultivation level, and it had even more so become tremendously tough after being tempered by the indestructible Heaven Scroll. "You're seeking death," Guoxiuan screeched. He pointed at the puppet, and said, "Kill that person. Still, be careful not to obliterate his body. Otherwise, it'll be a pain to piece it back together." the puppet tiger lunged over. Shua! It vanished. Pooh! Guoxiuan was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of his head. His mouth gaped open, and even his tongue was shuddering slightly. It disappeared. It was a puppet at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. And it disappeared soundlessly just like that? I'm not dreaming, am I? Xiao. At this moment, Luo Wu pushed Shui Yanyu back with a punch, and charged toward Ling Han. Although he had received a command to kill both Ling Han and Shui Yanyu, his memories from his previous life still affected him, causing him to harbor a stronger hostility toward Ling Han. Thus, he was determined to kill Ling Han before he killed Shui Yanyu. Retreat! Retreat! Guoxiuan shouted frantically. He had already become aware of Ling Han's uncanny abilities. Ling Han turned his head around to glance at Luo Wu. He had always planned to kill Luo Wu, yet Luo Wu's fate right now was probably even worse than a simple death had already died, yet he was still being commanded around like a dog. Ling Han shook his head. Such a person didn't deserve his sympathy. He was merely sighing about fate. Luo Wu was only a puppet right now, so of course his decision-making couldn't compare to that of a real person. Although Guoxiuan had issued a command, Luo Wu had already launched an attack. Thus, he would naturally have to complete this attack before retreating. Xiao. Luo Wu also vanished. Ling Han turned around to smile at Guoxiuan, and said, "There's only you and me left now." Guoxiuan trembled in fright. Generally speaking, alchemists, formation cultivators, and weaponsmiths all had a common flaw. That was, their battle prowess wasn't high. It would be already quite excellent if their battle prowess was equivalent to their cultivation, while it would be almost impossible for them to possess a battle prowess that exceeded their rank. The reason for this was simple. They spent most of their time and effort on areas other than martial arts, so how could they increase their battle prowess? If this were not the case, it would be far too unfair to others. Guoxiuan was no exception to this trend. However, he was a puppeteer, and he had been protected by two puppets just then. Moreover, the puppet tiger had possessed a battle prowess at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. That being the case, what did it matter whether his own battle prowess was powerful or not? The puppets were the root of his confidence. Now, however, both of his puppets had vanished mysteriously and without as much as a peep. This baffled him, and also terrified him. In addition, his cultivation level was only at the late stage of the medium extreme, so he truly didn't have any confidence in his own battle prowess. More importantly, the soundproofing ability of this room was far too good. No one would hear his cries for help even if he screamed at the top of his lungs. His only hope was to escape from this place. I'll make a run for it. He wasn't good at hiding his intentions, and his eyes drifted toward the door as this thought flashed through his mind. He immediately made a dash for the door, hoping he could escape and call reinforcements. Now that it had come to this, his initial thoughts of hiding Ling Han and refining him into a puppet of the Sun-Moon tier had naturally disappeared as well. He would consider these matters after escaping from here. To his surprise, Ling Han didn't pursue him. "Excellent," he exclaimed in his mind. A delighted smile stretched across his face as he drew closer and closer to the door. Xiao! A cold glint shot over. Ah! Guoxiuan shrieked in pain as he viciously face-planted into the floor. He turned around, only to see that there was a wound on his leg. He had no idea what it was caused by, yet it was clear that several meridians and tendons in his thigh had been snapped. This damage was naturally caused by the annihilating dragon star arrow, an attack that was as quick as light. Guoxiuan forcefully endured the agonizing pain as he frantically crawled up and limped toward the door. There was only one thought racing through his mind right now, and that was to escape. "I overestimated you." Ling Han leaped over and extended his hand toward Guoxiuan's head. "Don't come over. Guoxiuan screeched. He swatted his hands toward Ling Han. His battle prowess was only a so-so. In fact, it was slightly lower than his cultivation level. Ling Han shook his head. Guoxiuan's counterattacks and struggles were completely useless in the face of his overwhelming power, and he was able to capture him with a single move. Come, tell me about your legless master. He hadn't planned to become enemies with Pei Ji before. However, it was inevitable that they would end up battling each other now that Pei Ji's disciple had already revealed his true nature. Thus, Ling Han had to seize this opportunity to learn about his opponent's abilities. Chapter 1025, Aura of the Demon Master. Why you can't kill me? Otherwise, my master will never forgive you. Guoxiuan said shakily. Ling Han shook his head, and said, I thought that someone as freakish and ruthless as you would also be ruthless toward themselves. How are you so cowardly? Ling Han threw Luo Wu's corpse aside. It was genuinely a corpse now, as the true origin stones inside had already been extracted and the formations carved into it destroyed. Apart from its bones being relatively sturdy, this corpse had little difference from other ordinary corpses. You created this puppet, am I correct? Ling Han pointed at the corpse, and continued, You were ruthless enough to dig the organs out from others, yet you're afraid of suffering a similar fate? Guoxiuan shuddered in fright, and frantically explained, it's different. That's only a piece of raw material, not a human. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Guoxiuan's outlook on life was already completely twisted. He was clearly a coward, yet he was somehow able to commit such disgusting atrocities. Ling Han slapped him across the face, and said, I don't want to read your disgusting memory, so answer my questions. Shui Yanyu walked over and placed her sword on Guoxiuan's neck. What's the point of speaking with such people? They're better off dead. No. No. Guoxiuan was extremely terrified. Don't kill me, don't kill me. I'll tell you everything that you want to know. Please don't kill me. The sound of pissing could be heard as Guoxiuan shrieked in terror. He had wet himself in fright. Shui Yanyu hurriedly pinched her nose as she retreated into the distance. Ling Han also wanted to give him a good hard kick. There truly weren't many people who were as cowardly as him. Tell me everything you know, he said coldly. Guoxiuan nodded vigorously, and said, As you wish, as you wish. I'll speak, I'll tell you everything. He started to tell a story. He had already become Pei Ji's disciple over 30,000 years ago. At that time, he was only 6 or 7 years old. Perhaps he was 2 years older than that, or perhaps he was 2 years younger than that. It was too long ago, so his memory of that time had already become hazy. In these 30,000 years, he had learned martial arts and puppet-making from Pei Ji. During that time, Pei Ji had also taken in 4 more disciples. Guoxiuan had initially been unaware of how he had become Pei Ji's disciple, yet he saw a shadow of himself on his 4 junior brothers' bodies. Although this island was isolated, the sea was no stranger to all kinds of unforeseen circumstances. There were tsunamis and there were pirates, and in the decades and centuries that passed, people would occasionally drift over to this island. However, none of them could escape the fate of being refined into a puppet by Pei Ji. Sometimes, there were children among those who arrived, and Pei Ji would choose a few talented ones to become his disciples. If he later discovered that there was no value in raising them, he would kill them without mercy. Thus, Guoxiuan deduced that he himself was also the descendant of someone who had drifted here. His parents had been killed by Pei Ji, yet due to his relatively good talent, he was spared by Pei Ji and even taken in as a disciple. He had been too young at that time, so he was unable to remember any of these events. Or perhaps he had been traumatized so much that these memories were suppressed in some hidden corner of his brain. However, even if he knew the truth, he still didn't dare develop any shred of hatred toward Pei Ji. After all, Pei Ji had 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets. Even if he and the other 4 disciples were to team up, they would still be easily insta-killed by these 2 puppets. Pei Ji was an outstanding puppeteer, yet it seemed like he had experienced some dramatic event that made him uninterested in developing his talents. Instead, he chose to become a tyrant on this island, someone who brought nightmares to those who drifted to this place. As for Pei Ji's background in history, Guoxiuan knew absolutely nothing. He merely knew that the colossal pit was extremely mysterious. A peculiar mist-like matter would drift out from it every year, and if it was fused into a puppet's body, it would cause the puppet to become much stronger than before. Moreover, creating a puppet usually took several months, yet with the help of the divine mist, this time would be compressed into a mere few days. Divine mist? Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he said, "Where is it? Show me." Guoxiuan trembled nervously as he crawled up and opened a drawer. He retrieved a jade vial, and said, "The divine mist is enclosed in here." He lowered his head to hide the viciousness that was flashing across his eyes. This divine mist was extremely helpful in creating puppets, but it would corrode one's divine sense if they were to directly inhale it. It would transform one into a puppet-like tool whose only aim was to kill. The only difference was that they wouldn't listen to commands. Once he dealt with Ling Han, Guoxiuan wouldn't be afraid of the remaining woman in the least. Ling Han accepted the vial, but didn't immediately open it up. Instead, he tossed Guoxiuan into the Black Tower, and then entered with Shui Yanyu. He was about to examine an unknown substance, so it was naturally the safest to do so in the Black Tower. "Small tower, can you determine what this is?" Ling Han tossed the jade vial into the air. "Pa!" With a thought, the jade vial instantly exploded into pieces. A wisp of black mist instantly streaked into the air and shifted into all kinds of forms. It transformed into the shape of a beast, then a bird, and then a human who had a single horn on their head and a tail extending from their rear. Small Tower appeared, and exclaimed in unison with Ling Han, "Demonic Qi." This was definitely demonic Qi. Ling Han had seen this substance in the lower realm before. Although there was only a wisp of it, it was far more powerful than the aura of the Azura Demon Emperor. That's right. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and the Azura Demon Emperor was immediately brought before him. This demon had been confined in the Black Tower this entire time. My respects to Master. Master's fortune is shared with heaven, and Master's lifespan is eternal and boundless. The Azura Demon Emperor was extremely obsequious, and his behavior was completely typical of a base person. He glanced at Shui Yanyu, and instantly dropped down on his knees. My respects to Master's wife. Master has such refined taste. Master's wife is as beautiful as a celestial maiden, and her aura is brimming with nobility and elegance. She's definitely a beauty who only appears once every hundreds of millions of years. Shui Yanyu was completely dumbstruck. How can there be such an obsequious person? Does he have no face? Ling Han humphed, and said, "Enough with the nonsense. Hurry up and check this demonic Qi out. Tell me about its origin." "As you wish, as you wish." The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly nodded and bowed before turning his gaze to the wisp of demonic Qi. His smoke-like body involuntarily quaked, and he stuttered, This is a wisp of demonic Qi from a demon master." "Demon master?" Ling Han glared at him, and said, "Explain more clearly." The Azura Demon Emperor was completely void of any temper now, and he immediately started to nod and bow again. In the immortal realm, those who have reached the Genesis tier are referred to as saints. In the netherworld, however, those who have reached the Genesis tier are referred to as demon masters. Shui Yanyu was astonished by the sight of the Azura Demon Emperor, and she interjected, "This is a demon from the netherworld?" "This lowly demon is indeed from the netherworld." As expected, the eyes of Master's wife radiate with a brilliance that sees through all of my thoughts. The Azura Demon Emperor flattered Shui Yanyu relentlessly. Ling Han was astounded by the revelation. This wisp of aura was left by a demon master whose rank is equivalent to the Genesis tier? Hang on. Wasn't there a suppressed passageway in the flame cave of the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm? And wasn't there a being who referred to itself as Demon Master Zhen Yi trying to break through the passageway and enter this realm? Gasp. He had actually quarreled with a great elite at the Genesis tier. The beauty of Master's wife is like the sun in the sky that blinds one with its dazzling radiance. The aura of Master's wife is like the brilliant moon whose chastity makes one drop their head in shame. The Azura Demon Emperor knew no shame as he continued to praise and flatter Shui Yanyu. However, at some point in time, he suddenly lunged toward the wisp of demonic chi in the air. Ha ha ha. Once I fuse with this wisp of demonic chi, my power will soar rapidly, and I'll recover a battle prowess of the Mountain River tier. Killing you two will be as easy as slaughtering defenseless chickens. The Azura Demon Emperor laughed excitedly as it neared the wisp of demonic chi. Chapter 1026, Completely Subjugated. The Azura Demon Emperor was a coward who was extremely afraid of death. In order to stay alive, he had even kneeled down to lick the feet of Ling Han, who had only been at the heaven tier at that time. However, as the saying went, a great being knew when to yield and when not to yield. The Azura Demon Emperor had yielded for so long because he was waiting for a chance to rise up. And now, his chance had finally come. His battle prowess had fallen dramatically after he traveled through the barrier between the two realms and forcefully entered the small world. His battle prowess had fallen to 15 stars of the Shattering Void tier, and he knew that he was no match for a freak like Ling Han. However, his battle prowess would instantly soar back to the low extreme of the Mountain River tier if he were able to absorb this wisp of demonic chi. So what if Ling Han was supremely talented and freakish? Would he be able to defend against the power of an immortal-level cultivator? There was absolutely no way. There was a look of intoxication on the Azura Demon Emperor's face as he arrived before the wisp of demonic chi. He would receive tremendous benefits if he were able to absorb this wisp of Demon Master-level demon chi, as there was a shred of a Demon Master's comprehension contained within it. To beings of the immortal realm, this wisp of aura was no different from a fatal poison. To beings of the netherworld, however, this wisp of aura was a supreme tonic. Moreover, it was actually a good thing that there was only a wisp of this aura. Otherwise, if there were more, the Azura Demon Emperor wouldn't dare absorb it. If he absorbed too much, he would definitely be crushed by the overwhelming power contained within it. After all, the Genesis tier was far too powerful. I'm only an inch away. Half an inch. Huh. Why can't I advance any further? The Azura Demon Emperor turned around in shock, only to find that he was already firmly gripped in Ling Han's hand. He was unable to move forward even a single millimeter. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Not bad. Your courage has grown quite a lot. Master, you jest." The Azura Demon Emperor was a mist-like being who didn't have a physical body, and he immediately elongated his body to grab onto Ling Han's thigh. I was merely overcome by a rush of stupid impulsiveness. Master, just pretend that I was spewing sh*t. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "You really want to absorb this wisp of demonic chi? I beg for your bestowal, Master." There was an obsequious smile plastered to the Azura Demon Emperor's face as he spoke. Ling Han, don't fall for his tricks. Shui Yanyu warned. This Demon Emperor was far too two-faced. The Azura Demon Emperor's heart jolted when he heard this. Ling Han seemed like he were about to grant his wish, yet Shui Yanyu's warning would potentially change his mind. "Fine, I'll bestow this demonic chi unto you," Ling Han said with a smile. The demonic chi was merely a poisonous substance to him, so it held little value. He released his grip on the Azura Demon Emperor. The Azura Demon Emperor was overcome with exuberance, and he immediately opened his mouth and swallowed the wisp of demonic chi. Boom! His body expanded like a balloon, yet he quickly shrunk back down again, returning to his normal size. He didn't appear any different, yet they could clearly sense that the Azura Demon Emperor's aura was rising rapidly. He broke through to the immortal level in the blink of an eye, releasing a vast and profound aura. Peak stage of the low extreme of the mountain river tier. Ha ha ha. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately started to roar with laughter. There was a smug look on his face, and he said, Ling Han, oh Ling Han, you truly are stupid beyond belief. You actually allowed me to regain my strength. Today, I'll show you what immortal level power truly looks like. Shui Yenyu was transfixed with astonishment. She wasn't astonished by the Azura Demon Emperor's power, but rather by the shamelessness that he displayed. His attitude toward them had flipped faster than one could flip the page of a book. He had still been calling them master and master's wife just a moment ago, yet he was suddenly so arrogant and smug right now. Did he know no shame? Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, Your strength has recovered to the peak stage of the low extreme of the mountain river tier? Huh? How do you know? The Azura Demon Emperor was slightly surprised. It was only normal that Ling Han knew that he had reached the immortal level. However, him being able to determine his cultivation level appeared extremely uncanny. An ominous feeling welled up in his heart. Ling Han sighed, and said, Little Azura, how many years have you been in here for? You have no right to refer to me as Little Azura. I'm the Azura Demon Emperor, the Azura Demon Emperor replied angrily. He had only bowed down to Ling Han because great beings all knew when to yield and when not to yield. Did they think that he was truly shameless and cowardly? Of course he wasn't. Ling Han continued, You've been in here for so long that you've already turned stupid. Did you really believe that my strength wouldn't advance after so many years? Why you? The Azura Demon Emperor's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. This brat was a freak who couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han smiled faintly and unleashed his aura. An aura that was far more powerful than the Azura Demon Emperor's aura instantly swept through the air. Master! The Azura Demon Emperor immediately threw himself to Ling Han's feet and grabbed onto his leg. He nudged his head against Ling Han's leg, and said, This underling missed you immensely. Not seeing you for one day felt like being apart for 3 full years. Shui Yenyu grimaced in speechlessness. Weren't you pretty aggressive just then? Ling Han asked casually. I was experiencing a bout of schizophrenia just then. The Azura Demon Emperor suddenly became serious, and said, I'm sure you're aware of it, Master, but when someone is locked up for too long, they'll slowly go insane and even develop personality disorders. That was exactly what happened to me. However, please be at ease, Master. This underling has already destroyed the other personalities. From now on, this underling will be your most loyal dog. If you tell me to walk east, I definitely won't walk west. Ling Han gazed at him, and said, I've already given you 2 chances. If the Azura Demon Emperor could sweat, he would definitely be drenched in cold sweat right now. Anyhow, he still wiped his forehead out of habit. After all, he had resided in a human's body for a long time, and was already accustomed to such an action. Rest assured, Master, I definitely won't disobey you for a 3rd time, the Azura Demon Emperor vowed. This time, he had genuinely been terrified by Ling Han. Only a few years had passed, yet Ling Han had already advanced into the immortal level from the heaven tier. Moreover, he had done more than just advance into the mountain river tier, had already reached the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. If he continued at this rate, he would be able to reach the Genesis tier in a few thousand years, or perhaps only a few centuries. There would be no harm in following such a master. In fact, there would instead be an abundance of opportunities. The Azura Demon Emperor definitely had a pragmatic personality. He instantly came to a decision in his mind, was willing to be an underling, an obedient dog, as long as Ling Han could maintain his rate of growth. He knew that even if he were a dog, he would still be an extremely noble and powerful dog. Even those that were several times more powerful than him would have to show him utmost respect. Ling Han nodded, and said, "This is your last chance. There will be no third time. Thank you for your kindness, Master. Thank you for your kindness." The Azura Demon Emperor was overcome with delight. Ling Han planned to completely subjugate the Azura Demon Emperor, as the unique attributes that he possessed were actually quite useful. For example, he could enter and control the body of a puppet. "I'll hand this puppet to you. Enter its body, and fight for me in the future." Ling Han retrieved the puppet tiger. The Azura Demon Emperor didn't care in the least whether he entered the body of a human or the body of a dog. He immediately heeded Ling Han's command and entered the puppet tiger. The puppet tiger instantly started to move. "Master, this puppet is at the consummate level," he exclaimed in excitement. One had to realize that, at his peak, he only had a cultivation level at the medium extreme. He was still a long way off from reaching the consummate level. "Are you not satisfied?" "I'm satisfied. Very satisfied. As satisfied can be." The Azura Demon Emperor was shaking with excitement. Ling Han nodded, and said, "As long as you remain honest and do my bidding, I can even give you puppets at the Sun-Moon tier and Heavenly Body tier in the future. In fact, finding Genesis tier demonic chi for you to absorb isn't out of the question either." "Master, you're too kind. I'm willing to be your dog and slave." The Azura Demon Emperor drifted out of the puppet tiger and latched onto Ling Han's leg again. This time, he didn't dare to oppose Ling Han even though he had received a powerful puppet that was at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. After all, this was a puppet that had been captured by Ling Han. Gasp! Master is so powerful. He's even able to crush beings at the consummate level. Chapter 1027, Abhorrent Practices. Ling Han grabbed Wuxia. He was still unconscious after being knocked out by Ling Han's 7-kill subduing soul technique previously. This secret technique was naturally more deadly to those of a lower cultivation level. In fact, cultivators at the low extreme could be easily killed by it. Wuxia's eyes shot open as he was slapped awake. However, he was completely stupefied by what he saw. "Where is this? How long was I unconscious for us to have reached some unfamiliar place so far away from the island? Why you?" He was almost scared to death upon seeing Ling Han as the latter was completely unharmed. Did he not open the jade vial? No. I can clearly see the fragments of the jade vial in the distance, so he definitely opened it. "Are you disappointed?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Tell me, why should I not kill you?" I. I'm also a victim. I was forced into doing this," Wuxia said in a shaky voice. He pushed all of the blame onto Pei Ji. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Perhaps you were forced to in the beginning. However, I don't see a shred of remorse in your eyes right now. You're no different from Pei Ji anymore. Little Azura, kill him." The Azura Demon Emperor immediately entered the puppet tiger and raised its tiger head, and said, "As you command, Master." Wuxia was both shocked and confused. This puppet tiger had been created by him, and he had also used it as his steed for a long time. It could be said that he knew it through and through. However, this puppet tiger actually opened its mouth to speak just then. This almost frightened him to death. Ever since he remembered, he had never set foot outside this island, so it was only normal that he wasn't aware of the matters regarding the netherworld. As such, he found this situation completely unfathomable. You're also a puppeteer. He was convinced that he had figured out the truth. Ling Han was definitely a puppeteer who was numerous times more skilled than him, thus allowing him to easily capture his puppet and even give it the ability to speak. His supreme skills made the puppet tiger extremely lively, as if it were truly sentient and intelligent. The Azura Demon Emperor leaped over and snapped its jaws shut, crushing Guoxiuan's neck with a single bite. Guoxiuan's divine sense was also obliterated by this overwhelming attack, and the life drained from him in the blink of an eye. "Stay by my side and don't attack without my command," Ling Han said. The Azura Demon Emperor was overcome with joy. "Is Master planning to let me out? I'm so touched." Ling Han waved his hand, and the two people and one tiger immediately appeared in the workshop. "This is the immortal realm," the Azura Demon Emperor said in astonishment. Although he had already guessed that Ling Han had arrived in the immortal realm after learning that his cultivation level was at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, he was still astonished when he experienced the completely different regulations of heaven and earth and the rich spiritual chi for himself. Only a few years had passed, yet Ling Han had already advanced into the immortal level. Moreover, he could even take out a puppet at the consummate level of the mountain river tier with a casual wave of his hand. This astonished him immensely. "Lead the way," Ling Han commanded. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly nodded, and said, "As you wish, Master." Now was the time for him to perform. He had to show his master just how loyal he was. He immediately opened the door and exited the workshop. "Search every single room," Ling Han said. Pang! The Azura Demon Emperor rammed open the door of the neighboring room. However, apart from piles of tools and materials, there was only an empty platform in the middle of the room. There wasn't anyone there. They left the room, and the Azura Demon Emperor rammed open the door of another room. Ugh! A distressed expression appeared on Shui Yenyu's face. She immediately turned around and started to vomit. The layout of this room was identical to that of the previous two rooms, with piles of tools and materials sitting everywhere. There was also a platform in the middle of this room, yet unlike the other two rooms, there was a corpse that had been cut into 8 pieces resting on top of it. It was Fan Yong. He hadn't been refined into a puppet yet, and thus his expression of terror from before his death was still frozen onto his face. The sight was enough to send shivers through one's body. In fact, Ling Han held a suspicion that Fan Yong had still been alive when he had been cut into 8 pieces. How could one not be petrified as they watched their body being dissected, their organs being dug out, and their blood flowing out drop by drop? It was no surprise that the expression on his face was so twisted. "This bunch of monsters," Shui Yenyu said angrily. Ling Han unleashed his divine patterns of flame and burned Fan Yong's corpse into ashes. Although there was strong animosity between them, Fan Yong's crimes also disappeared along with his death. Next room. The Azura Demon Emperor obediently led the way. He knew that his master was in an extremely bad mood right now, with even his tone being icy cold as if it had seeped out from an ice cave. Meanwhile, he found these sights to be extremely normal and unsurprising. Wasn't it just a dismembered corpse? The netherworld had tons of things that were hundreds or even thousands of times crueler and bloodier than this. Pang! He rammed his way into the 4th room. There was a living person. How did you people enter? Huh? Isn't this senior brother's puppet tiger? Why is it with you guys? The person in the room was Tong Yulong, and he was currently busy with making his puppet. He had only turned around because he had heard a disturbance. A female body that was being processed lay on the platform that was already painted red with blood. Her slender legs and arms had already been severed from her torso, and her abdomen had also been sliced open. Tong Yulong was in the process of digging out her organs. This female was none other than Lu Ying. To their surprise, she still hadn't drawn her last breath yet. Her eyes slowly focused on Ling Han, and her lips trembled a little. However, she was unable to make a single sound. This didn't matter, though, as Ling Han could guess what she wanted to say: kill the monsters on this island. Also, kill her and free her from this world of pain. Kill him. Ling Han commanded coldly. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately lunged toward Tong Yulong. Roar! A puppet wolf appeared and blocked the Azura Demon Emperor's advance. This puppet was also at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, meaning that its battle prowess was no lower than that of the Azura Demon Emperor. Ling Han took a few steps forward and cast his divine sense out like a net. Xiao! The puppet wolf instantly disappeared from the room. Pooh! Like Guoxiuan from before, Tong Yulong's eyes also bulged out in shock, his tongue hanging out in disbelief. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor had already arrived before him and swatted his paw over. Paw! His head was obliterated, and the headless corpse crashed to the ground with a loud thud. Ling Han swung his sword and destroyed the remnants of Lu Ying's life force. Lu Ying gave him a grateful look as she shut her eyes one final time. Then, Ling Han waved his hand and burned Lu Ying's corpse to ashes. They entered the fifth room and discovered another victim. Yang Taicheng. This sturdy man had also been dismembered, with each of his limbs immersed in some sort of silver liquid. Unlike Lu Ying, however, his life force had already completely vanished. He had already been dead for quite some time. He had most likely been dismembered sometime today, as Ling Han had still seen him in the morning. Ling Han only had killing intent for Luo Wu and Fan Yong, and he didn't have any good impression of Lu Ying either. After all, she had come here to kill him. However, he harbored great respect for Yang Taicheng, as the latter could push his emotions aside and firmly follow his principles. There were few people who could do this. Moreover, they had battled side by side before, and he had even entrusted his back to Yang Taicheng at one time. Rest in peace, Brother Yang. I'll definitely slay those monsters to appease your spirit. Ling Han said solemnly. Then, he turned around, and said, let's return to our residence. Perhaps we can still save the others. Chapter 1028, Nemesis of Puppets. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu hurried toward the courtyard that they had been living in. Just as they left the workshop, they saw Chuida and Yuanxiang walking over together. Chuida was extremely baffled when he saw Ling Han and Shui Yenyu walk over, especially since the puppet tiger was following behind them. What's going on? Weren't they meant to capture these two people? What's with this situation? What on earth happened? This doesn't make any sense at all. Die! Ling Han roared. The Azura Demon Emperor immediately charged toward Chuida. It had to be said that he was quite smart. Ling Han hadn't explicitly said whom he wanted to kill, yet the Azura Demon Emperor directly chose to target Chuida. He probably thought that, as a man, Ling Han wouldn't want him to kill a beauty like Yuanxiang. Chuida's puppet bear leaped out to battle with the Azura Demon Emperor. Brother Ling, what's the meaning of this? Yuanxiang asked in confusion. Oh, you can thank me later, Ling Han said calmly. Pei Ji and his 5 disciples wanted to refine all of us into puppets, and Luo Wu, Fan Yong, Lu Ying, and Brother Yang have all been killed already. What a load of bullsh*t. Chuida retorted. Lady Yin, don't listen to his nonsense. He's simply accusing me with no evidence at all. I invited you because I sincerely want you to witness the beauty of newly refined puppets. I would never fathom bringing harm to you. Heh, Guoxiuan said the exact same thing, Ling Han said with a cold chuckle. He walked over and directly absorbed the puppet bear into the Black Tower. He didn't have the patience to argue with Chuida anymore. Chuida and Yuanxiang were both astounded by Ling Han's actions. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor charged over and quickly swatted Chuida to death. Without their puppets, the battle prowess of puppeteers was truly too terrible to look at. Ling Han shook his head when saw that Yuanxiang was still lost in a daze, and said, "I'll explain when we gather everyone together." They hurried back to where the courtyards were located. Ning Tai and Bu Zhengyun both appeared and tried to capture Ling Han, yet both of them were swatted to death by the Azura Demon Emperor after having their puppets easily stripped away by Ling Han. Pang, pang, pang. Ling Han and the others knocked on the doors of the courtyards and called Jin Zhihui and Fu Tian out. They were still in their courtyards as they were most likely on the bottom of the list, and thus it wasn't their turn to be killed and refined yet. Meanwhile, they were also completely oblivious to what had happened around them. Ling Han recounted what they had seen just then, and the expressions of Jin Zhihui and the two others instantly changed drastically. "I'm going to kill that old bastard." Fu Tian roared furiously. The veins on his body suddenly bulged, and the hair on his head also stood on ends as a devastating aura emanated from his body. "What do you two think?" Ling Han turned to look at Yuanxiang and Jin Zhihui. "Kill them all," Jin Zhihui said as he waved his fist. Yuanxiang nodded, but remained silent. "Very well." Ling Han drummed his fingers on the table, and said, "There's only the old man left right now." Puppeteers relied on their puppets to battle, yet he was coincidentally the most powerful nemesis of puppets. Moreover, the Azura Demon Emperor could enter and control any puppet. Thus, they would be able to turn their enemies' weapons into their weapons. So, even if Pei Ji owned 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets, and even if he was an elite at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier himself, Ling Han was still completely unafraid of him. Instead, he was brimming with confidence. The group of 5 set out together and started to search for Pei Ji. However, they looked around for a long time, but were still unable to find him. "There's still a small workshop. Pei Ji is definitely in there." Ling Han recalled Guo Xiuwen's words, and started to head toward the small workshop. This was genuinely a small workshop. It was 9 meters by 9 meters, and its door was securely shut. Fu Tian took a deep breath before ferociously charging toward the door. Pang! He slammed into the door like a powerful meteor. The door instantly shuddered and crashed to the ground. Meanwhile, Fu Tian was also pushed back. However, he simply shook his head and quickly recovered his best condition immediately. The door sent puffs of dust billowing through the air as it crashed down, and they could vaguely see Pei Ji resting in the embrace of a woman in the room. There was a look of intoxication and gentleness in his eyes as he caressed the face and breast of the woman. However, the female was clearly a puppet. Although her body was extremely lifelike, there were 2 black and lifeless gems where her eyes should have been. "Since you've arrived here, it means that my disciples are all dead." Pei Ji wasn't flustered, and had the female puppet turn him around to face Ling Han and the others. A look of contempt flashed across his face, and he scolded, "What a bunch of useless trash. Old bastard, I'm going to murder you." Fu Tian was the first to charge over, yet the female puppet merely extended an arm toward him. It seemed as if the sky were about to collapse, and it appeared as if the hand could expand without limit. Pa! The palm struck down, and Fu Tian was instantly sent flying. Blood spurted through the air as he collapsed to the ground and fainted. He didn't die after facing that attack. Pei Ji was clearly a little surprised, and said, "I underestimated you people. No wonder you were able to kill all of my disciples. However, since you've come here, don't dream of leaving alive." He whistled loudly, and a middle-aged man instantly walked out from some dark corner. He was also a puppet. However, the appearance of this puppet was quite harrowing, as there were sabers and swords sticking out from all over its body, making it look like an echidna. "Kill them," Pei Ji commanded coldly. He then turned around and buried his head into the female puppet's chest, gnawing at it greedily. "Freak! Jean Zhihui said with a grimace. Was this old man a fucking necrophile? Pei Ji was still lost in lust, yet he suddenly noticed that something was off. Why was it suddenly so quiet? He turned around, and he almost wet himself in shock. It disappeared. The middle-aged male puppet had vanished. It wasn't in the sky, nor was it on the ground. Where the fuck had it gone? One had to realize that it was a pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppet. It was just as powerful as the puppet that he was embracing. The Azura Demon Emperor charged over, and roared, "Die!" He had grown quite a bit, and he knew whom to attack even without Ling Han's command. As the Emperor of Obsequiousness, his ability to read the mood was naturally top-notch. The female puppet struck her palm toward the Azura Demon Emperor. Pang! The Azura Demon Emperor was instantly sent flying, and even his tiger head had been twisted at an unnatural angle by the force of the strike. The gulf between their battle prowess was far too huge. The female puppet was at the pseudo-Sun Moon tier, while the puppet tiger was merely at the late stage of the consummate level. Use this one. Ling Han casually waved his hand, retrieving the middle-aged male puppet and tossing it toward the Azura Demon Emperor. Thank you, Master. The Azura Demon Emperor instantly transformed into a burst of demonic chi and entered the middle-aged male puppet's body. Such a powerful feeling. He waved his arms around with a smile, and said, "Using a humanoid body sure is easier. What kind of monstrosity is this?" Pei Ji was stunned by the sight of the Azura Demon Emperor. He had handcrafted this puppet, so how was it captured by that person so easily? And why could it be controlled so easily? You're a monstrosity. Eat your uncle's attack. The Azura Demon Emperor charged over again, though he didn't dare refer to himself as Emperor anymore. However, he still had the confidence to refer to himself other people's Uncle One. The female puppet dashed over, and the two pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets immediately became locked in an intense battle. Pei Ji pressed down with his arms and jumped out from the female puppet's embrace. This puppet only knew how to battle, and there was no way that it could ensure his safety. If he was trapped between the two puppets, there was every possibility that he would be smashed into pieces. Humph. Even if there's only me left, killing you people will still be a piece of cake, he sneered. To everyone's surprise, segments of metal started to extend from the stumps on his severed legs, instantly causing his body to become almost 6 meters tall. Chapter 1029, Scared Away. Pei Ji appeared extremely strange right now. He was still a normal person down to his thighs, yet from there on downward, his legs looked like the roots of some old tree. It was a complex entanglement of metal rods, and they lifted him up to become something like a giant. Ha ha ha. Watch how this old man annihilates you all. Like a gigantic centipede, the countless metal rods started to move and carry him toward Ling Han and the others. Everyone hurriedly dispersed to avoid being knocked over by Pei Ji's strike. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. Ling Han unleashed his annihilating Dragon Star Arrow and fired several volleys of Origin Power arrows. Some of these Origin Power arrows were silver-white, some were crimson-red, and some were earthen-yellow. The silver-white arrows were ordinary Origin Power arrows, while the crimson-red ones were imbued with the divine patterns of flame, and the earthen-yellow ones were imbued with the divine patterns of gravity. Pei Ji didn't dare face these arrows head-on, so he raised his leg and formed a dense net before his body that was surprisingly able to block the Origin Power arrows. Not only was this net able to block Ling Han's Origin Power arrows, but it was even able to block the attacks from the other people as well. The difference in cultivation level between them was a bit too large. Pei Ji was an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level, yet what about Ling Han and the other 4 people? Fu Tian was unconscious. Yuanxiang was at the late stage of the medium extreme, and her battle prowess was at the peak stage. Jean Zhihui was at the early stage of the medium extreme, and his battle prowess was also at the early stage. Shui Yenyu was at the peak stage of the low extreme, and her battle prowess was 1 star above her cultivation level. Ling Han was at the early stage of the medium extreme, and his battle prowess was 5 stars above his cultivation level, though his peak battle prowess could reach 6 stars. Even if they teamed up, they were still no match for Pei Ji. "You brats actually dare attack me? You're all seeking death," Pei Ji said with a sneer. Shua. Ling Han cast a net as his body flashed about. He had been preparing the crimson ground locking net this entire time, and he was finally able to fully activate it at this moment. As the net flew out, it became larger and larger. This kind of treasure was naturally able to expand and shrink a great deal. At its limit, it could even envelop a mountain, much less Pei Ji, who was only 6 meters tall. Pei Ji didn't expect this, and the small size of the workshop meant that there was no room for him to hide, either. He was instantly enveloped by the net. What? Why did my power suddenly fall so dramatically? Shock spread across his face as his cultivation level fell to the peak stage of the high extreme. His cultivation level had fallen an entire minor level. One had to realize that as a puppeteer, he didn't possess a powerful battle prowess to begin with. Thus, he was understandably flustered now that his cultivation level had been reduced by an entire minor level. Moreover, the net that trapped him was made out of some peculiar material that he couldn't break free from no matter what. In fact, it even affected his mobility to some degree. He frantically let out a low growl, and the female puppet immediately turned around and grabbed at the crimson ground locking net. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly chased over, and said, "Stupid B***tch, eat this Uncle Saber." He removed a saber that was sticking out of his body and slashed it at the female puppet. The Azura Demon Emperor was a sleazeball, and once he put down his dignity as an elite, his shamelessness truly knew no bounds. His speech would become vile and vulgar. The female puppet simply pushed a palm backward, while her other hand latched onto the crimson ground locking net and forcefully pulled it up. She was at the pseudo-sun moon tier, and the overwhelming strength that she possessed allowed her to lift a large portion of the net up. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor's saber slashed into her palm with a deafening clang. Everyone felt as if their eardrums were about to burst, and they were unable to hear anything else. They could only see flashes of dazzling light as the saber continued to clash against the hand. Pang! After a short while, the Azura Demon Emperor was suddenly pushed back. Although both puppets were at the pseudo-sun moon tier, it was evident that the female puppet was stronger than the male one. Pa, 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 pa. The sound of uncanny footsteps traveled over, and they saw more and more puppets climb out from all kinds of nooks and crannies. These puppets came in all kinds of strange and peculiar forms. Pei Ji pointed through the net, and said, "Ha ha ha. Kill all of those people for me." There was a strong killing intent on his face, and it was clear that he was infuriated with being forced into such a sorry state. There were hundreds of these puppets already, and still more were surging out from all over the room. According to Guoxiuan, he had lived on this island for around 30,000 years. With this in mind, Pei Ji had definitely lived here even longer than that. With so much time at his disposal, how many puppets had he managed to create? These puppets could completely be viewed as an army. Although they were lacking in intelligence, they had many other advantages. They had no weak points, no sense of pain, and no fear of death. At this moment, Fu Tian also regained his consciousness, though his battle prowess had fallen dramatically due to his severe injuries. Everyone was shaking with apprehension. There were so many puppets that it was possible that they could drown them to death. Ling Han roared and charged toward the puppets. Xiao, 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 xiao. Once he broke away from the others, he naturally became the main target of the puppets. Countless attacks streaked toward him. There were slashes from claws, explosions from sound waves, and bullets of black light. Ling Han advanced fearlessly. These puppets were mostly at the low extreme of the mountain river tier, so he didn't even need to defend against their attacks, no matter how thick and relentless they were. He simply unleashed his divine sense, causing the puppets to rapidly vanish wherever he passed. The nemesis of puppets had come. His target was the female puppet, as the Azura Demon Emperor would be freed once he captured her. When that time came, it would be extremely easy for them to suppress Pei Ji. Hurry! Hurry up and get rid of this net for me! Pei Ji screamed in exasperation. A dozen or so puppets grabbed onto the net and tried to pry it open. Meanwhile, Ling Han dashed forward and cast his divine sense toward the female puppet. Then, the female puppet suddenly vanished. Pooh! Pei Ji witnessed this sight just as he broke free from the net, and his eyes almost popped out of his head in shock and disbelief. He hadn't seen how the male puppet had vanished, yet just then, he witnessed the full process of the female puppet being captured. Truth be told, he was still completely baffled and unable to comprehend what was happening before him. Legless old man, watch how this uncle slays you. The Azura Demon Emperor roared with laughter as he charged toward Pei Ji. Pei Ji naturally knew how powerful this puppet was. In fright, he shouted, "Block him!" Meanwhile, he glared at Ling Han with hatred. This brat had incredibly uncanny abilities, and it seemed as if he were his fated nemesis. Yang Taicheng's great elite who had a battle prowess at the consummate level had already been dealt with, so dealing with the remaining people should have been a piece of cake. They should have posed no threat at all, yet they somehow managed to pull off this unimaginable feat. Anyhow, old and experienced as he was, he knew that he couldn't lose his temper and throw his life away here. He immediately turned to flee, not forgetting to say, "Brat, if you pursue me, I can assure you that all of your companions will lose their lives." He laughed loudly as he fled into the distance. Ling Han hesitated briefly before turning back around to assist the others in destroying the puppets. Although there was a tremendous number of puppets here, the castaways had the Azura Demon Emperor who was extremely powerful, as well as Ling Han who was the nemesis of puppets. Thus, even though the puppets surged toward them in waves, they were easily mowed down like grass being cut. After about 30 minutes, the puppets finally stopped appearing, their numbers decreasing with each puppet that was killed. Chapter 1030, True Culprit. With Ling Han the puppet nemesis present, and with the protection of the Azura Demon Emperor, who was an elite at the pseudo-sun moon tier, they were finally able to exterminate all of the puppets. Yuanxiang, Fu Tian, and Jin Zhihui all sighed with emotion. Were it not for Ling Han, it was very likely that they would have all died here. Regardless of how powerful or freakish they were, how could they defeat a puppet at the pseudo-sun moon tier by themselves? Yang Taicheng was a prime example of this. At the mention of Yang Taicheng, everyone sighed in sympathy. He was someone who could stick by his principles no matter the situation. In the world of today, such a quality was truly rare and invaluable. With the battle over and done with, Fu Tian started to treat his wounds. He had gritted his teeth and participated in the battle just then as he hadn't wanted to be a burden on everyone else. He had an extremely competitive and proud personality. "Master, should we pursue that legless old man?" the Azura Demon Emperor asked. Ling Han pondered for a moment before shaking his head, and said, "Forget about it. He's the ruler of this island, and he's been here for tens of thousands of years as well. He definitely won't let us find him. But if we don't dispose of him, he'll continue to commit abhorrent crimes." Shui Yanyu said. "Then let's have a look around here to see if the old thief has left any clues," Ling Han replied. "In fact, we know nothing about that old thief. If we understand his history and personality, it will be much easier to find him." "Master is so wise," the Azura Demon Emperor said obsequiously. Ling Han glanced over, and tossed a puppet bear toward him. "Enter this puppet instead." The Azura Demon Emperor was slightly confused. Wasn't his current puppet stronger? It was at the pseudo-sun-moon tier, and its battle prowess was several times stronger than that of the puppet bear. However, he suddenly came to a realization after seeing the look of disgust in Ling Han's eyes. As a human, his master naturally detested refining human corpses into puppets. He didn't dare disobey Ling Han, and he immediately entered the body of the puppet bear. These puppets didn't possess any free will or life force, so entering and exiting them couldn't be any easier. Ling Han incinerated both human puppets. He had only kept them to battle Pei Ji, so now that their battle was over, it was also right for him to give the deceased a proper send-off. They started to look for clues in the small workshop. Ling Han hadn't held high hopes, yet they managed to find a diary that was kept by Pei Ji. This diary detailed the process and reason for Pei Ji's abominable hobby. So it turns out that the male and female puppets were his senior brother and senior sister. The three of them were all disciples of the same puppeteer. He secretly loved his senior sister, yet she married his senior brother. He didn't let his emotions show, yet after their master died, he poisoned the two of them before restraining and then refining them into puppets. No wonder the male puppet was stabbed full of sabers and swords. It was because Pei Ji hated him tremendously. What an absolute freak. He even refined the woman that he loved into a puppet. The diary also had a detailed description of how he had refined his senior brother and senior sister. Their insults, reprimands, fury, terror, and all kinds of other things were all carefully recorded. It was as if Pei Ji wanted to relive that experience through reading his diary. What kind of hopelessness would one experience when they're betrayed by their junior brother and refined into a puppet alive? Shui Yenyu's eyes were burning with anger as she shook her head. So, one can't simply focus on talent when taking in disciples. The most important factor is still their character. Otherwise, it's no different from raising a wolf. Ling Han also sighed with emotion, yet his words sent ripples of panic through the Azura Demon Emperor's mind. Was his master giving him a veiled warning? Wang! Right at this moment, a sword light lit up and pierced toward Ling Han's back. This strike was both quick and vicious, and it was more so completely unexpected. The battle had already ended, and there were only people they had fought alongside in this room. Who would suddenly attack Ling Han? Pooh! The sword pierced deep into Ling Han's body. Ling Han roared loudly and struck behind him. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor also came to his senses, and hurriedly let out a growl before swinging his bare paws toward the assailant. The assailant didn't have time to retrieve their sword, so they could only release it and leap back. They instantly retreated 16 or so meters before descending like a cloud and landing lightly on their feet. The assailant was none other than Yuanxiang. Ling Han! Shui Yenyu shouted in shock, and immediately held Ling Han in support as tears rolled down her cheeks. The sword had run through Ling Han's body, and only the hilt was still visible on the outside. Jin Zhihui was both shocked and enraged as he glared at Yuanxiang, and he roared, What are you doing? Only Fu Tian remained sitting on the ground, yet it was clear that his muscles were already tight with tension. Ling Han simply stared at Yuanxiang. In a raspy voice, he said, So the culprit on the ship was actually you. How so? The careful expression that Yuanxiang had worn this entire time suddenly changed into an expression of pride and arrogance. Not only that, but her aura also changed dramatically, instantly shooting up to the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Ling Han coughed a few times as his face grew even paler, and said, just before Zhou Gaoyang died, he said that the culprit wasn't him. Yuanxiang had successfully stabbed Ling Han, so she was in no hurry at all. In order to stay alive, it's only natural that he would attempt to shift the blame elsewhere. Ling Han shook his head, and said, if the culprit were him, he would have most likely only begged for forgiveness rather than try to shift the blame. Yuanxiang was slightly surprised, and said, So, you started to suspect me? Indeed. Ling Han nodded, and said, I was thinking that since the Dark Night Hall could send an assassin, why couldn't they send two? One in the open, and one in hiding. Yuanxiang hesitated for a moment before bursting into loud laughter. Spot on. There's no need for me to deceive you any longer. I'm indeed an assassin from the Dark Night Hall. However, don't even think about buying time. That sword is covered in potent poison, and even elites at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier would die if they were pierced by it. Shui Yenyu was finally overcome with shock. She was extremely confident in Ling Han's regeneration ability, yet poison was a completely different story. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, I have to thank you for admitting to this. I was only suspicious before, but I'm finally certain now. He stood up and raised his left arm slightly, and the sword that was stabbed into him instantly fell onto the ground with a clang. It turned out that the sword hadn't pierced his body at all. Rather, it had merely been held between his arm and chest. What? The expression on Yuanxiang's pretty face changed drastically, and she said incredulously, I clearly stabbed the sword through your heart. The location was definitely right. Unless, she stared at Ling Han, and continued, unless you were prepared this entire time and had already shifted the locations of your bones. A smile blossomed across Ling Han's face, and he said, since I was suspicious about there being another assassin from the Dark Night Hall among us, how could I not have my guard up? But why did you suspect me? Yuanxiang couldn't fathom the reason, and she said, I clearly used a secret technique to suppress my cultivation level. Even elites at the lower end of the Sun-Moon tier shouldn't have been able to see through my disguise, much less you. Ling Han nodded, and replied, your disguise was indeed good. However, when we were surrounded by the puppets, you still ended up using power that far exceeded what you should have been capable of. That raised suspicion in my mind, and also caused me to become more wary of you. Yuanxiang was slightly dazed upon hearing this answer. The situation had been so chaotic at that time, yet Ling Han still had the leisure to keep an eye on the entire battleground? What kind of freak was he? This couldn't be helped. Who told Ling Han's divine sense to be far, far superior compared to that of ordinary cultivators at the medium extreme? Since the simple method didn't work, I'll have to resort to the more difficult method. Yuanxiang chuckled coldly, and drew another sword as a frosty and sinister aura emanated from her body. She was an elite at the consummate level. Chapter 1031, Killing Yuanxiang. Ling Han. Shui Yenyu's fear instantly turned into delight, and she couldn't help but tightly embrace Ling Han from behind. She had truly been scared to death just then. Jin Zhiwei also breathed a sigh of relief, yet his eyes were burning with extreme fury as he glowered at Yuanxiang. Generally speaking, betrayal was what people detested the most. They had gone through thick and thin together battling the demonic snakes, defending against the pirate attack, and exterminating the puppets on this island. It could be said that they had formed strong bonds of camaraderie. Yet, Yuanxiang suddenly betrayed them at this moment, and it felt as if a sword had been plunged into all of their backs. Master, let me tear this B*TCH to shreds, the Azura Demon Emperor offered. Ling Han nodded, and said, fine. The Azura Demon Emperor growled and immediately lunged toward Yuanxiang. He had been held captive for too long, and he had a strong desire to stretch and relax his body through battle. Anyhow, he was merely controlling the body of a puppet, so it didn't matter even if the puppet was destroyed. Ling Han had a ton of spares, and he could simply enter another puppet. He was only afraid of divine sense attacks. You're merely a piece of trash. Yuanxiang raised her sword and charged to attack. She was indeed really powerful, with a cultivation level at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Although she couldn't fight above her cultivation level, her battle prowess was still the strongest among everyone present. As the saying went, a tigerless mountain would be ruled by monkeys. This was exactly the case right now. If young Taichung were still alive, her only option would be to lie low and continue using her disguise. Pung! 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 Z. The Azura Demon Emperor continuously retreated, and in the end, slid over to Ling Han's feet. His momentum was only halted when Ling Han raised his foot and stepped on his body. "Are you strong enough to defeat her or what?" Ling Han said with a chuckle. There was a bitter expression on the Azura Demon Emperor's face, and he said, "Master, she's a bit too strong." The puppet bear was only at the late stage of the consummate level, and it was an entire sub-minor level weaker than Yuanxiang. As such, he had been on the back foot the entire time. Ha ha ha. Yuanxiang laughed loudly, and said, "Who told you to pretend to be so compassionate and kind? You clearly had 2 pseudo-sun moon tier puppets, yet you destroyed them with your own hands. Pay! You had already used it once, so what's wrong with using it twice or thrice? Engage her. I'll cover you from behind." Ling Han kicked the Azura Demon Emperor, and the puppet bear instantly flew through the sky toward Yuanxiang. 100 Ghost Sword Technique. Yuanxiang let out a soft cry, and numerous ghosts materialized in the air and swooped toward the Azura Demon Emperor as she brandished her sword. Ling Han also moved. He was currently preparing the Crimson Ground locking net, and as long as he trapped Yuanxiang within it, her battle prowess would immediately fall to the high extreme. At that time, it would be extremely easy to capture her. In your dreams. Yuanxiang's body danced around in a peculiar manner, making Ling Han unable to lock onto her. Once someone was prepared, it was extremely difficult to utilize treasures such as the Crimson Ground locking net. Is that so? Ling Han smiled faintly, and suddenly activated his 7-kill subduing soul technique. Divine sense attacks were formless and intangible, and their speed was also quick beyond belief. Generally speaking, they were impossible to dodge. One could only face such an attack head-on and duel to see whose divine sense was stronger and more resilient. Yuanxiang was instantly hit by the attack, causing her movements to falter and her sword to stop. However, she was someone at the peak stage of the consummate level, after all, so she was only dazed for a mere fraction of a second. There was absolutely no time for Ling Han to absorb her into the Black Tower. In fact, there wasn't even enough time for him to release the Crimson Ground locking net. However, the Azura Demon Emperor suddenly lunged over at this moment. He didn't swing his paws, instead choosing to give Yuanxiang a tight bear hug. He was only 1 sub-minor level weaker than Yuanxiang, so her suddenly stopping for an instant was enough time for him to take advantage of it. "Master, I've caught her," the Azura Demon Emperor shouted excitedly. She was an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. Even when he had been at his strongest, he could still only kneel if he were to come across such a powerful being. He had never imagined that he would be able to hold his own against such an opponent. Yuanxiang's expression suddenly changed, and she shouted, "Let go." The Azura Demon Emperor couldn't hurt her, but Ling Han was already activating the Crimson Ground locking net. She was stronger than the Azura Demon Emperor, and the puppet bear's arm was twisted at an unnatural angle as she tried to break free with all her might. It was clear that the puppet bear's bones had been snapped out of shape. If it were a normal being, they would definitely howl in pain. Moreover, how much strength could one exert if they were to suffer such unbearable pain? However, the Azura Demon Emperor didn't feel sh*t. He simply maintained his tight bear hug on Yuanxiang and tried to buy as much time for Ling Han as possible. Hua! The Crimson Ground locking net unfurled and fell down from above them. Yuanxiang and the Azura Demon Emperor's cultivation level instantly fell by 1 minor level. Yuanxiang unleashed her might, and bursts of sword chi shot out from her body and slashed at the Azura Demon Emperor. Her strength was still considerably above the Azura Demon Emperor's, so she was naturally at an advantage when battling against him. The body of the puppet bear became so mangled that it was barely recognizable. This was already thanks to the fact that the puppet bear had been tempered by secret techniques, causing its bones to become extremely sturdy. Otherwise, it would have already been torn to shreds by Yuanxiang's ferocious and relentless attacks. Ling Han drew his bow and activated the ultimate arrow. When the arrow pointed at Yuanxiang, she instantly felt a cold chill envelop her. She had a feeling that she would definitely die if Ling Han released this arrow. At this moment, she didn't have any time to ponder what kind of arrow technique this was, nor did she have time to mull over why it was so mighty and powerful. There was only a single thought running through her mind, and that was to break free from this net and avoid being shot by the arrow. Otherwise, death was the only thing that awaited her. Let go of me. Let go of me. Yuanxiang's pretty face distorted in distress, and there wasn't a single shred of charisma about her anymore. She drew on all her strength and origin power, and even started to draw on her source power as she started to flee while carrying the Azura Demon Emperor and Crimson Ground locking net. Surprisingly, her speed was actually quite quick. However, regardless of how fast she was, how could she compete against the annihilating Dragon Star Arrow? Xiao! The sharp arrow pierced through the air and whizzed toward Yuanxiang. Pooh! The arrow sped through the net and pierced into Yuanxiang's chest, sending a plume of blood spurting through the air. The arrow continued to penetrate through her body, eventually exiting through her back and piercing into the puppet bear's body. Pang! The Azura Demon Emperor couldn't help but let go under the tremendous power of the blow, causing the human and bear to finally separate. Brat, I'm going to kill. Pang! Yuanxiang was just about to shout a threat, yet her entire chest suddenly exploded. Her face was filled with shock, and as she lowered her head to look at her non-existent heart, a single thought ran through her mind. Isn't this the Dark Knight Hall's explosive assassin arrow? How laughable. As an assassin of the Dark Knight Hall, I actually died at the hands of a weapon forged by my own organization. Is this retribution? Just as she finished thinking this, her entire body fell forward, dead. The Azura Demon Emperor transformed into his misty form, and said, Master, another puppet has been destroyed. First, the puppet tiger had been destroyed, and now the puppet bear had also been destroyed. A day had yet to pass, yet he had already destroyed two extremely valuable host bodies. Ling Han casually tossed a puppet wolf toward him, and said, No worries. Just change into another puppet. After that, he put the Crimson Ground locking net away. It was an extremely useful treasure, especially before he reached the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. I genuinely need to thank the Luo clan. If Luo Hongdao learned of his thoughts, he would definitely seethe with rage. How could it not be useful? Did Ling Han know how many resources the Luo clan had poured into forging this net? Search this place thoroughly, and don't leave any stone unturned. Make sure to take everything away. Chapter 1032, Treasure that Heavenly Body Tier Cultivators Fight For? Ling Han needed to prepare for two scenarios. What if they couldn't find Pei Ji anymore? This was an island, and there were only limited resources available. Only the demonic qi seemed to be limitless, appearing once every year. However, the other resources would definitely dwindle as they were used. There was simply no way that one could use the resources as they pleased. Take, for example, the godly metal that was used to strengthen puppets. Pei Ji had taken these from his master, and there was only a small amount remaining right now. If they took it away, Pei Ji would be missing a vital ingredient for puppet making. No matter how talented he was, how could he make a puppet without the necessary materials? Even if he carried some materials on him, he would only be able to make a limited amount of puppets. He would be dreaming if he wanted to recreate the large army of puppets that he'd once owned. Some of the materials were extremely valuable, which made Ling Han extremely satisfied. This was because puppet making had some relation to forging, alchemy, formations, and so on and so forth. Thus, the materials that were used for puppet making could also be used for other purposes. Ling Han sorted the materials and found that many could be sold once he returned to the capital. He was certainly going to rake in a huge amount of true origin stones. Jin Zhihui and Fu Tian both received some materials as well, though the largest portion was obviously taken by Ling Han. The two of them had no issues with this, as Ling Han had indeed done the most. They were basically just passengers and onlookers. Strictly speaking, they even owed their lives to Ling Han. Without him, it was very likely that they would be lying in 8 pieces in some workshop right now, forced to watch as their bodies were refined into puppets. They found a few ships, though they all were quite small. In fact, they were only a little bigger than boats. However, these ships were made from the unique demonic beasts of this sea, and they were even fitted with some strange device that allowed the ships to cut through the sea at high speed. There were 5 such ships, so each of them was able to take one. The extra ship was stowed away by Ling Han. It didn't matter whether he needed it in the future or not. The space in the Black Tower was very large anyway, so he wasn't afraid of it taking up too much room. Farewell, Brother Ling. Till later. Jin Zhihui and Fu Tian both bade Ling Han farewell. They didn't plan to return to the Tyrant Axe Harbor either. Instead, they ventured into the sea, each going their own way. Ling Han watched them disappear into the distance. Then, he turned around and smiled at Shui Yenyu, saying, "Wife, it's only you and me left on this island. Should we make a bunch of kids before returning?" Shui Yenyu punched his chest in annoyance, and said, "Do you think I'm a sow? Also, are we really the only 2 people on this island?" She shot a glance at the Azura Demon Emperor. The Azura Demon Emperor was given a fright, scared that Master's wife would suddenly slay him due to embarrassment. He immediately raised a leg and started to scratch his ear as any normal wolf would. It was as if his expression were saying that he wasn't a person, merely a dog. Shui Yenyu couldn't help but giggle upon seeing his expression. She had already learned of his background, yet she was still unable to fathom how an elite at the Mountain River tier could be so extremely shameless. Ling Han chortled loudly, and sent the Azura Demon Emperor back into the Black Tower. He then pulled her over and started groping her slender and shapely body. "Damn pervert! Stop it!" Shui Yenyu murmured. Her starry eyes were extremely seductive, and her hands rested on Ling Han's chest, trying to push him away, yet also unwilling to do so. "Stop what?" Ling Han kissed her jade-like neck and lightly nibbled her earlobe, causing her slender body to suddenly tighten up and her face to suddenly flush with an alluring shade of red. "This damn pervert has figured out all my weak points." Shui Yenyu was breathing heavily as she buried her head into Ling Han's chest, and she said, "Pei Ji might still be on the island." Ling Han nodded in agreement. This was indeed a possibility as this island was very large, after all. They had also been few in numbers, so they had been unable to thoroughly search the entire island. Perhaps Pei Ji was waiting for Ling Han and the others to leave before he returned to his workshop. Ling Han continued to grope Shui Yenyu's body as he pondered this possibility. He had already developed a habit of doing this. Shui Yenyu was slightly annoyed by this. "What kind of habit is this? Why does he have to grope my chest when pondering questions? In these past few days, this damn pervert has already groped my chest for longer than I have in my entire life. We don't have time to deal with that old thief. Let's burn those courtyards down and be done with it." Ling Han finally reached a decision, and said, "Let's continue to look for pirates. Now that we have our own ship, we can come and go as we please." Shui Yenyu nodded in agreement. They had killed quite a lot of pirates before, yet it had only been enough to complete a single mission. Since they had already come here, and since the mission could be completed numerous times, they might as well kill a few more pirates. They immediately sprung into action, burning the entire village and then setting off from the beach. I wonder where that colossal pit leads to, Ling Han said. Moreover, it even spits out a wisp of demonic qi every once in a while. We definitely have to check it out in the future and see what lies at the bottom of the pit. Shui Yenyu was also extremely curious, and said, we can't fly before reaching the heavenly body tier, so we can only come back after we break through. I wonder if elites at the heavenly body tier can fly over this expanse of sea, Ling Han mused. Shui Yenyu wasn't sure either, as the Shui clan didn't have any elites at the heavenly body tier. As for the heavenly body tier cultivators of other clans, who had the courage to ask them? The ship was genuinely small, and it was completely unsuited for sailing over the sea, with a single wave being capable of capsizing the ship. However, this was no ordinary ship, but a ship that had been made by puppeteers. As such, there were all kinds of small trinkets on the ship that allowed it to remain extremely stable while still being extremely quick. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were in no hurry either, as they enjoyed some lovey-dovey time with each other. They were only 15 or so centimeters away from becoming a true pair of husband and wife. Ho Yang, how long are you going to flee? A loud roar suddenly traveled over. Heh, Zhu Yueyun, do you think I'm afraid of you? Another voice replied. Then why are you running away? The first voice asked. Then let's battle. This lord is also pissed off by the insect following behind me. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu exchanged a surprised glance. They raised their heads, only to see two people standing proudly as they faced off in the sky. The ability to fly. They were great elites at the heavenly body tier. No. It was more correct to say that they were at least at the heavenly body tier. Ling Han turned to Shui Yenyu, and asked, have you ever heard of these two people before? Shui Yenyu pondered for a moment, and an astonished expression suddenly appeared on her face. Zhu Yueyun. Could he be the heavenly body tier elite from the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire? He's a lone cultivator, and although he's reached the heavenly body tier, he's never formed a force of his own. As for Ho Yang, I think he's a great elite from the Jade Drop Majestic Empire. Why is he facing off against Zhu Yueyun in this kind of place? Sure enough, these two people were both elites at the heavenly body tier. Otherwise, huge changes would ensue if a great elite at the Eternal River tier or Genesis tier were to appear on the joint peace planet. Judging by their previous exchange, it seems like they've already skirmished for quite a while, Ling Han said. At their cultivation, there are only two possibilities that could have led to this. The first is a grudge between them, and the second is because of a treasure. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu could see the astonishment in each other's eyes as they exchanged a glance. A treasure that could trigger a fight between two elites at the heavenly body tier was definitely incredibly valuable. Chapter 1033, Caught Up. Humph. The regulations of heaven and earth are extremely chaotic here, so it's genuinely an optimal place to battle. Zhu Yueyun chuckled, and said, Ho Yang, if you don't want to die here, then hurry and hand the item over. Ho Yang roared with laughter, and said, Zhu Yueyun, are you trying to scare this lord? You and I are both at the peak stage of the low extreme, and our battle prowess is similarly at 2 stars. If we battle with our lives on the line, it's hard to say who will be killing whom. I only know that if you don't hand the item over, this will be the resting place for your corpse. Zhu Yueyun threatened in a sinister voice. Is this really necessary? Ho Yang asked. That item can't be opened anyway. Are you really willing to bet your life and tens of millions of years of cultivation on some unknown item? Zhu Yueyun flared up in rage, and said, you and I discovered that item together, and we even agreed to examine it together. However, you took advantage of the moment when I wasn't paying attention, and actually fled with the item. How can I swallow this anger if I don't kill you? Ho Yang chuckled, and said, I didn't think that you would actually be so naive. No wonder you've spent all of your time on cultivation and been lonely this entire time. You're stupid beyond belief. Die. Zhu Yueyun roared in anger and lashed out at Ho Yang. Boom. Devastating flashes of light instantly exploded throughout the sky as bursts of overwhelming shock waves surged out from the battle. Like a giant mountain, a roaring wave that measured hundreds of meters tall crashed through the sea. Fuck. We're going to be caught up in the shock waves from their battle. Ling Han grimaced. Their luck was truly terrible. There were so many places that the two heavenly body tier elites could have battled, yet they somehow managed to choose the sky directly above them. Weren't they two innocent bystanders going to suffer for nothing? However, now that it had come to this, their only option was to endure. Ling Han held his sword in his hand as he stood at the bow of the ship and awaited the giant wave that was surging toward them. When the wave arrived, he gave a loud roar and ferociously slashed down, forcefully carving out a narrow gap in the wave and allowing their ship to pass. Shwa, shwa, shwa. He continued to slash his sword down. This wave was far too large, and each slash that he performed could only open a gap that ran 30 meters deep. He needed to continuously slash at the wave to ensure that it didn't close in on them. The ship finally sailed through the wave, and Ling Han was so tired that he could barely raise his arms. The seawater here was extremely peculiar, with each drop being as heavy as a mountain. So, how terrifying was a surging wave? Moreover, the wave had been triggered by two elites at the heavenly body tier, so it naturally contained a shred of the heavenly body tier's might. It was already a minor miracle that Ling Han had been able to navigate the ship through it, and it would have been beyond comprehension if he hadn't been completely beat and exhausted. Boom! 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 Before Ling Han could even recover his breath, several new waves suddenly formed and started to surge toward them. Taking a quick glance, there were at least several hundred gigantic waves. Holy fuck! Ling Han wanted to give up and send the ship into the Black Tower. Meanwhile, he and Shui Yenyu could take cover underwater. They could resurface when the two elites finished their battle, then take their ship out, and set off for their destination again. However, coming across a battle between two elites at the heavenly body tier was a rare opportunity, and watching them battle would definitely be especially beneficial to his own cultivation. Thus, Ling Han gritted his teeth and continued to endure. He continued to unleash the 10,000 techniques return to one to slash the giant waves apart. Fortunately, his power had also increased considerably along with the elevation of his cultivation level. Thus, although the might of the 10,000 techniques return to one was significantly reduced, its toll on him had also become much lower than before, allowing him to keep enduring. Of course, the most important factor was still his sturdy physique and astonishing stamina. Otherwise, if he'd been an ordinary cultivator at the mountain river tier, his arms would have already become numb and limp. Ling Han persevered, and under the strong intensity of the waves, his willpower was also steeled. A burning fighting spirit raged within him, and he felt as if he could even battle against an elite at the heavenly body tier. Meanwhile, the battle in the sky became more and more intense as both elites began to unleash their true powers. Dark clouds swarmed about, blotting out the sun. Then, in the next instant, flames seared through the air and transformed it into a sea of fire, appearing as if it were about to incinerate the sky and evaporate the sea. Elites at the heavenly body tier were far too powerful. Ling Han felt as if he were a mere ant. No, he felt even worse than a mere ant. If either of the two people wanted to kill him, they would be able to do so with a single glance, not even needing to lift a single finger. Power. This is true power. There was a strong hunger in Ling Han's mind as excitement surged through his body. He was unable to see the battle in the sky clearly, as the two elites soared about and unleashed their complete strength. The sky was burning, and the sea was boiling. This place had become like hell on earth. Fortunately, the two elites wandered further and further away from Ling Han and Shui Yenyu's position. Otherwise, Ling Han definitely wouldn't have been able to block the devastating shock waves that were being generated by their intense battle. Boom! An extremely thick column of light suddenly shot out from the sea and soared into the sky. Such was its astounding might that it could even be seen from hundreds of kilometers away. Ho Yang chuckled, and said, "Zhu Yueyun, a historical site was opened by us. Why don't you head over and explore it? This lord won't compete with you." Bullsh *T. That site is only at the Sun-Moon tier. How can it compete with the value of that box? Zhu Yueyun roared angrily. It's completely worthless. It can't be opened anyway. Then why are you keeping it? Give it to me. This lord likes this kind of strange and peculiar things. Fuck off. The two of them started to battle again, the intensity of their battle even greater than before. Blood sprayed from their bodies and instantly dyed the sky red, even transforming into a boundless blood rain that was brimming with terrifying killing intent. Numerous creatures in the sea became unfortunate victims, dying violently as their bodies came into contact with the blood rain. This was heavenly body tier blood, and being struck by a drop of such blood was like being struck by a heavenly body one. It was extremely terrifying. Ling Han had naturally placed Shui Yenyu and the ship into the Black Tower already, and he had also entered it himself. The surging waves carried them along, and they were submerged into the sea at times and were tossed into the air at others. The Black Tower was like a mustard seed, and even the extreme weight of the gravity fields was unable to affect it. In fact, it was resistant to all powers, and thus the regulations in this sea were completely ineffective against it. Xiao! A small dot of light suddenly fell down from the sky. Ling Han had a sharp eye, and he instantly determined that it was a white jade box. It plopped into the sea and then started to sink rapidly. Is that what the two heavenly body tier elites were fighting over? Ling Han's heart thumped with excitement. He couldn't snatch something from a heavenly body tier elite, but this treasure had been knocked out of their hands now, giving him a chance to obtain it. Though, it had landed quite far away. Before Ling Han could even exit the Black Tower, Zhu Yueyun and Ho Yang had already shot down from the sky and plunged into the sea. They continued to skirmish as they chased after the white jade box, and both of them wanted to break free and move in front of the other. However, the gravity was immense here, and the jade box sunk at a tremendous speed. Ling Han lost sight of it in no time at all, and the two powerful elites also disappeared from his sight in a flash. Meanwhile, the Black Tower continued to drift along the sea, unseen and undetected by others. Ling Han's mind whirred, and he finally made a decision. He resolutely leaped out of the Black Tower. An overwhelming weight instantly bore down on him, dragging him deeper and deeper into the sea. This was exactly what he wanted. Chapter 1034, Seabed. It would naturally be best if Ling Han could obtain the jade box. Even if he couldn't, he still wanted to explore the seabed where the column of light had shot out from. After learning of the Star Sea's history, Ling Han had already developed a strong interest in its seabed. With his outstanding fortune, perhaps he would be able to find some inheritance or interrealm treasure. The two elites had said that the phenomenon caused by the column of light represented the reappearance of a sun-moon tier abode. They weren't interested, yet Ling Han was. I'll look for the jade box first, and then explore the abode. 30 meters, 300 meters, several hundred meters. Ling Han continued to sink toward the seabed. As he descended further and further, the surrounding environment also became increasingly dim. However, unlike other seas, the depths of the Star Sea were only dim, with the light still present no matter how deep he descended. This was because of the tremendous gravity fields here. They were so powerful that even the refraction of light was forced to undergo some kind of extraordinary change. Light was pulled toward the bottom of the sea, and was unable to refract back to the surface one. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also experiencing crushing pressure. The water pressure is so terrifying. There was some kind of indescribable regulation here. If one were to scoop up some seawater, they would find that there was absolutely nothing special about it. Upon entering the sea, however, one would discover that every single drop of water weighed as much as a mountain. With power at the mountain river tier, one could easily endure the weight and pressure of a few mountains. However, every drop of water in the Star Sea was like a mountain, making it an insanely terrifying prospect. Most importantly, the water pressure would increase the further one descended. At great depths, one wouldn't feel like they were being crushed by mountains anymore. Rather, they would feel as though they were being crushed by a heavenly body. If cultivators fell into the sea, they would have to activate an origin power barrier to protect themselves. Otherwise, they would be crushed into pulp in no time at all. It was no wonder that people couldn't stay in submerged the sea for too long. After all, they would be facing certain death once they expended all of their origin power. Ling Han had initially planned to descend to the bottom and spend a few years walking back to shore. After experiencing the water pressure, however, he realized just how naive his plan had been. Of course, Ling Han was no ordinary person. First of all, he had a tremendously powerful physique. At the very least, he was still able to withstand the crushing pressure at this moment. It was just that his bones were already cracking and groaning under the immense stress. Secondly, he still had the Black Tower. So, even if expended all of his origin power, he would still be able to enter the Black Tower to recover. After reaching a depth of 3,000 meters, the surroundings finally became pitch black. 3,300 meters, 3,600 meters, 3,900 meters. Ling Han continued to venture deeper and deeper. If others learned of this, their jaws would definitely drop slack open in shock. People did indeed come to this sea to search for lost treasures that lay on the seabed. However, they would normally only explore the shallower regions of the sea. The limit was set at roughly 3,000 meters. Past this depth, the region of the sea would be labeled as the deep sea. The deep sea was incredibly dangerous, and just the water pressure alone would be able to crush most mountain river tier cultivators. Moreover, there were even devastating demonic beasts at such depths, and it was nothing special to come across one at the sun-moon tier. One could lose their life at any moment. How much of their power could cultivators exert in such a harsh environment? 4,800 meters, 5,100 meters, 5,400 meters. When Ling Han reached a depth of 6,000 meters, the surroundings suddenly became brighter. This luminance was given off by the fish in the sea. To Ling Han's surprise, their scales were actually able to emit light. When they swam in schools, they would be able to illuminate the entire space around them. What a dazzling sight! 7,500 meters, 8,400 meters. After reaching this depth, Ling Han's godly bones were finally unable to withstand the overwhelming pressure, and he had to channel his origin power to push back against the pressure. However, his origin power was being drained at a rapid rate. He retrieved a true origin stone and absorbed its energy as he continued to resist the pressure. 9,000 meters. Ling Han finally reached the seabed. The seabed wasn't flat, instead looking like a hilly range that was full of rises and falls. Like the fish from before, there were numerous stones that emitted light and illuminated the sea. This was a beautiful world, and if it weren't for the crushing pressure, Ling Han would really have loved to bring Shui Yanyu out to enjoy the stunning scenery together. It was a pity that Shui Yanyu didn't have a sturdy physique like him. Moreover, she was only at the peak stage of the low extreme, meaning that she wouldn't be able to withstand the devastating pressure of the sea anyway. If she came out, she would instantly be crushed into pulp. In the distance, there was a radiant glow that could be seen clearly even from very far away. That was the Sun-Moon Tier abode. Ling Han barely hesitated before swimming toward the column of light. As for the jade box, he could only leave that to luck. After all, the two elites at the heavenly body tier had come down before him. With their powerful abilities, they had definitely examined this area several times already. If the jade box had landed here, they would have already found it. Thus, he could only leave this to fate. Perhaps the heavens would favor him and make the jade box appear before his feet? He walked forward with great difficulty. His speed had fallen drastically after he arrived on the seabed, and if others saw him, his rigid and clumsy movements would surely elicit their laughter. He advanced slowly. If he were on the surface of the sea, he would have been able to cover this distance in a mere 10 minutes. Now, however, he had to spend almost half a day. Finally, an expanse of ruins appeared before him, one of its corners radiating with a dazzling light. This is probably a mountain gate. He could clearly tell that this place used to be a mountain. However, half of the mountain peak had already been sliced off. Meanwhile, most of the mountain had also sunken into the seabed. As a result, only a small portion of the mountain remained sitting in the water. A stone pillar that measured at least 30 meters in thickness and 300 meters in height stood at the waist of the mountain. This stone pillar was the source of the dazzling column of light. There was a cave entrance next to the stone pillar, and there was also some dim light radiating from within it. However, the light from the cave entrance appeared extremely insignificant when contrasted against the brilliant and piercing light from the stone pillar. Ling Han swam over and tried to enter the cave to explore it. However, a strong current suddenly surged over as a gigantic shark appeared before him. Rings of golden-veined patterns decorated the shark's colossal body. This was a golden-patterned shark, a demonic beast at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Surprisingly, a contemptuous smile tugged at the golden-patterned shark's lips as it discovered Ling Han. After reaching the mountain river tier, demonic beasts would have naturally developed intelligence already. In the shark's eyes, Ling Han was so weak that he was almost insignificant. However, the shark still swished its tail and shot toward Ling Han like an arrow, opening its mouth to bite as it did so. There was a loud snapping sound as it snapped its mouth shut. However, a confused look instantly appeared on its face. For some reason, it hadn't been able to bite into anything. The minuscule human had disappeared. The shark scanned its surroundings, yet it eventually gave up on its search. Instead, it swam toward the cave entrance. It had also been drawn here by the dazzling column of light. However, the clash between the two heavenly body tier elites just then had caused it to almost wet itself, so it hadn't dared venture over. Only after the two auras had disappeared for a long time did it dare swim back to this place. There were several other beings that had the same mindset as the shark. Glancing around, one could see that a turtle, crab, seahorse, and octopus had also appeared in the surroundings. These demonic beasts were all of similar strength. Thus, they didn't engage in battle, instead conversing using their divine sense after facing off for a short while. They then entered the cave one by one. "Huh!" the demonic beasts all exclaimed in astonishment when they arrived inside the cave. They discovered that the cave wasn't filled with water, but was a dry space instead. Chapter 1035, It's Mine Now. "This is the abode of a great human elite," the turtle said. "No, no, no. This is most likely a mountain sect that has had most of the regions inside destroyed," the seahorse said. "Only this one place still remains. This place definitely holds rare treasures," the other demonic beasts exclaimed in unison. They all communicated with their divine senses, and thus they were able to converse directly and overcome the difficulties posed by the language barriers between them. "The treasures of humans might not be useful for us," the crab said. It was a demon-faced crab, and there was a demon-like pattern on its shell. It was in human form right now, yet its pair of huge pincers still remained in their original form. The bodies of demonic beasts were akin to god tools. This was heaven's blessing to them. Of course, they wouldn't mind owning a few more god tools either. Hee, you can leave if you want. I don't mind using the treasures of humans, the prawn said. It was a black armored prawn that had a pitch-black body and an extremely sturdy shell. In fact, its outer shell was as sturdy as similarly ranked godly metal. This prawn could also shape-shift into human form, with a thick layer of black armor covering its body when it did so. This armor was transformed from none other than its outer shell. This was a residence built by humans, so it was unsuitable for the demonic beasts to enter in their original form, which was relatively huge. Moreover, this wasn't a water environment, meaning that assuming human form would naturally be the most suitable. The demon-faced crab humphed, and said, "There's no need for you to stick your nose into this lord's matters." Fine, fine. There are many hidden dangers here, so I say that we look for the treasures first, then decide how to divide them among us, the octopus suggested. She was the only female here, and her gray hair was plaited into dozens of braids. However, looking closely, one could see that each braid was actually a tentacle that was gently swaying about. She was a gray cloud octopus. I agree. Let's look for the treasures first. The demonic beasts reached a consensus and started exploring the ruins. It's been too long, and all of the valuable things have already crumbled to dust. Damn it! This is the constellation illusion grass, a level 5 godly medicine. If there were enough, it would be able to break through to the sun-moon tier. This is a peculiar radiant stone, and it can temper one's godly bones. It's a shame that it's already turned into dust. Otherwise, it could have raised my armor's defense by an entire cultivation level. Heavens! This is a 4-emperor pill. The wails and agonized cries of the demonic beasts continued to echo throughout the ruins. They were stunned by the amount and rarity of the treasures here, yet they were also filled with a deep grief as all of these treasures had already crumbled, turning into dust. There wasn't a single item that remained in optimal condition. This treasure storage was divided into several smaller rooms, and they went through each of these rooms one by one. They arrived at the final room, and all they found there was a single stone slab. This stone appeared extremely ordinary. This was also the demonic beast's first reaction. This stone was far too ordinary, not even giving off the slightest of lusters. This was the kind of stone that wouldn't attract a second glance if it were tossed onto the ground with other stones. The problem was, would one really place such an ordinary stone inside a treasure storage? It would be hard to determine if there was nothing to compare it to. However, the treasures in the other rooms were all at the sun-moon tier, and only this room housed a stone that appeared extremely ordinary. How could the demonic beasts not be suspicious? "What on earth is this thing?" a demonic beast asked curiously. "How about we examine it first? There's no need for us to fight over it before we learn of its functions," the demon-faced crab suggested. Agreed. The demonic beasts all shuffled over. No one dared to attack, as they had already reached a consensus. If anyone dared to make a move, they would definitely become the target for everyone else. However, this stone was truly as normal could be, even seeming extremely irregular in some places. It appeared as if it had been chipped off from a larger boulder. The demonic beasts tapped it and ran their hands over it, yet there was absolutely no reaction from the stone. However, their expressions changed drastically when they started attacking the stone. This was because attacking the stone was like attacking air, with the stone remaining firm and unmoving no matter how they attacked it. Although we're unaware of what other functions this stone has, just the fact that it can absorb attacks is already extremely shocking, the gray cloud octopus exclaimed. This stone slab wasn't just sturdy. The most astounding part was that it could actually absorb attacks. The faces of the demonic beasts were all filled with greed. Even if this stone slab had no other uses, just the fact that it could absorb attacks was already beyond extraordinary. Shwa! Several hands instantly grabbed at the stone. Now that they knew of its effect, everyone naturally wanted to obtain the stone for themselves. If they could use this stone as a shield, the strength of their defenses would definitely increase manyfold. Move aside. It's mine. The demonic beasts roared at each other as they fought over the stone. This was naturally a chaotic battle. Every single demonic beast was aiming for the stone slab, so they didn't have any intention of killing their opponents. However, whenever someone obtained the stone slab, they would instantly be surrounded and attacked by everyone else. Thus, even if there were demonic beasts who were slightly stronger, they still held no advantage at all in such a chaotic battle. Pang! Right at this moment, however, the golden-patterned shark's body suddenly exploded. The other demonic beasts were all given a fright. What happened? No one targeted him, so how did he suddenly die? At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared and reached toward the stone slab. It was none other than Ling Han. He hadn't lingered in battle just then, and had directly entered the Black Tower instead. However, he'd been swallowed into the golden-patterned shark's belly along with some seawater. Just then, he exited the Black Tower and unleashed his full strength, immediately causing the golden-patterned shark to explode into pieces. So what if it was a demonic beast? Its internal organs were still extremely fragile and vulnerable. Human. Damn it! The other demonic beasts were all shocked and infuriated. Although they didn't belong to the same race and weren't especially friendly with each other, they were all sea demons, after all. Even though they'd attacked each other at times, they were definitely firm allies when it came to fighting against external enemies. Moreover, Ling Han was actually trying to snatch the stone slab. They all attacked in unison. The tentacles of the octopus, pincers of the crab, and claws of the turtle all struck at Ling Han. Ling Han was merely at the early stage of the medium extreme, so he appeared extremely insignificant in the eyes of the demonic beasts. He had somehow managed to kill the golden-patterned shark just then, but such an event would definitely not happen a second time. Pang! Their attacks all slammed into Ling Han's back, and each of the 5 attacks was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. They were confident that no one at the medium extreme could withstand such an attack. However, although Ling Han spat out a huge mouthful of blood, his speed became even quicker as he shot forward and grabbed the stone slab with his hand. What? The 5 demonic beasts were all stunned. How was this possible? This human was merely at the medium extreme, so any single one of them should have been able to blast him into pieces, much less all 5 of them together. How did he only spit out a mouthful of blood? People all said that demonic beasts had powerful physiques. However, by the looks of it now, it appeared as though this human was the true demonic beast. Ling Han landed on the ground, stumbling forward a few steps before he caught himself. Searing pain burned across his back. Although his physique was on par with level 3 godly metal, he still felt a significant amount of pain after being hit by 5 consummate level demonic beasts. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and then another 2 mouthfuls of blood. Only then did he feel a little better. It hurts so fucking much. Ling Han shouted in his mind. However, the stone slab was finally his now. He wouldn't be afraid of losing it even if a heavenly body tier elite came over right now. Sorry, but this stone slab is mine now. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.